I have a kid sleep in the bed, so I think like equity, like I shouldn't. Very subtle. Double. I'm mostly after now. Bad job. No, she is. I'm not faster now. So
I know senior caution on
Oh yeah.
the rock shot.
Oh, you're literal pieces.
Like all of our other top jobs.
Now, what's this None you watch.
So you like settle down so you can get your name called.
Here, extra.
Back little check. Here.
Senator Speed. Senator Shaw. Senator Gabriella. Oh, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, wait. My name. Shaw. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Senator Gabriella.
He's walking in. Here.
Senator Latorno. Here. Senator Rappley. Senator Dumani.
They both back.
Senator Hardy. Senator Smith. Here.
Here.
Senator Carrington. Senator Key.
Here.
Senator Dellinger.
Here.
Senator Diego Passy.
Here.
Senator Lintz. Senator Chang.
Which one?
Jason.
There's only one now.
Senator Gonzalez.
Here.
Senator Pecoraro.
Here.
Senator Curtis.
Here.
Senator Good.
Here.
Senator Palmisano. Senator Dainsley. Senator Sung. Senator Udria. Here. Senator Howe. Senator Hess. Senator Lenny.
Here.
Senator Singh.
Here.
Senator Tong. Senator Wayne.
Here.
Senator Stokes. Senator Thompson. Here. Senator Caldwell.
Here.
Senator Madhawk.
Here.
Senator Camardo. Senator Bolsacek.
Here.
President Hopkins.
Here.
Vice President Lukachi.
Here.
Vice President Norwalk. Vice President Weissman. Here. Vice President Larkin.
Here.
Vice President Elbert.
Yep.
Vice President Dinner.
Was anyone's name not called?
Yeah.
Senator Bullock.
Senator Bullock?
You have me down.
Okay.
Senator Dudley?
Yes. Thank you.
Senator Kippola?
I saw the spreadsheet today.
Senator Kyle?
Yeah, I did.
And Senator Burnett?
Oh, if you emailed me, then that means I already put your name on a sentence.
Was there anyone else's name who wasn't called? Mine. Vice President Norwalk.
John, did you got me before?
Yes. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes. Are there any issues or concerns with the minutes from last week? Senator Letty? All right, Carolyn hasn't uploaded it yet, so we'll move on to announcements. You guys are looking for Facebook group. If you guys want to get involved in the campus refugee program, they'll be coming here, I believe, April 7th at 3:30 p.m. So talk to Tara about that. Lana and Annie, would you like to talk about the DSG class council campaign as well as the rules and procedures meeting?
Yeah, okay, so a couple of things, everyone. If you're running for re-election or election for VP, senator, or class council, your packets are due tomorrow at 6 p.m. Send them to anna.adair@duke.edu, not annie.adair. That was an error on the first one, so just make sure you actually get those emails into the right email address.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you are not eligible until I've responded to you saying, like, I got it, please. Because if I haven't responded, that means I didn't get it. So, like, that also helps me, like, with keeping track of all this. So make sure that it is to Anna.adair. You know, I don't want to have, like, a week from now, you be like, hey, I've never got an email back from you. Why aren't I on the ballot? God forbid that be on the day of. And then I say, well, you should contact me earlier. You sent it to Annie.adair. The other thing is that we are, like Alana just said, we're having an election and rules procedure meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's going to last 20 minutes. We can't constitutionally mandate that we're there, but we can highly, highly recommend it. We did this for young trustees. Theirs was actually an hour earlier. It was at 8 a.m., so I'm just saying. And that is just to be able to give you not instructions, but like going over the rules, letting you know like what your rights are, so that if at any point during the campaign, if you feel like one of your opponents is breaking a rule and you want to challenge that, like, we're going to give you all the resources that you need, and just like kind of go down the list, kind of like the big things that maybe you're going to miss if you don't do a super close reading of the bylaws. So just make everything clarified. And then if you can't come to that, just let me know. and we will make recommendations.
Yes, we'll try to figure something out. You have a set amount of money that you're also allowed to spend, so if you are going to start printing things tonight to start campaigning before the meeting, please make sure you keep all receipts that you have and keep a printed copy. We won't accept pictures, we won't accept digital versions of receipts, if you're getting flyers and things like that. Any questions about campaigns, rules, and elections? Yeah.
Where's the meeting tomorrow?
DSG.
DSG office.
You keep in mind, if you purchase a domain name, you will not be reimbursed for that, no matter how much you pay to consider your personal
For your class.
If you
Yeah,
pass, then
we talked.
Okay, so like that's.
and just like
Just
choose
asking
me.
for other people.
I can also, depending on how late we go tonight, I can do like campaign rules in 5 minutes, for those of you who work here.
Anyone else? Tara, can you talk about the answer?
Yeah, sure. I'm in a class called Refugee Lives, and so we're just investigating the possibility of having a refugee family come stay at Duke. It's like, we're really just in like the beginning stages of investigating it, but this Thursday at 3:30, I'm bringing the woman who like started this initiative. She's from Guilford College, which isn't too far. So if you want to come 3:30 on Thursday, let me know. It's going to be in the Franklin Center, which is on Central Campus, and it'll be really cool.
Senator Caldwell?
Tomorrow, if you go to Chipotle between 5 and 9 and mention you're there for the MTA and ALS fundraiser, 50% of the proceeds will go to the foundation, so it's kind of an easy way to help if anybody's thinking about going to Chipotle.
Is anyone else? Somebody?
I'd like to make a motion to move the yearbook funding survey item to the top of the agenda of the local forum.
Just a second. All right.
Oh, wait,
There's
no,
a motion.
can we finish announcements first?
That's what I would like, but there's a motion there.
Yeah.
So there's a
Do mine.
motion on the floor to move the Chanticleer budgetary statute to the top of the agenda. All those in favor? It has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nays have it. Moving on to further announcements. Does anyone have any additional announcements? Vice President McCutcheon?
Hey everyone, so a lot of people have reached out to me expressing interest in working on getting a wellness room in Perkins, more people than I can keep track of. So if you're interested in taking on this project with me, I know a lot of you have expressed interest, shoot me an email just so I can know and I can like start making a list of names and like organize what people are going to do. Thanks.
JP, do you want to elaborate on your rationale behind not really talking about programming? Is that?
I'm sorry?
You want to talk about what the Perkins Library said about programming for their rooms that they have?
Not quite enough information yet to articulate that fully.
Sure. Any additional announcements? Senator Mehta?
On Friday, there's a Pancakes for Parkinson's fundraiser, which is going to be awesome. It's in the Bryan Center from 11 to 3 p.m. Really awesome that UVA does it. They raise about $60,000 for it. So you can, I think it's going to be Friday, but if it rains, they might move it to next Wednesday. But I'll post about it in the.
Jacqueline, does anyone else have any additional announcements? Is anyone here for public forum? Okay, at this time, I recommend a motion to move the resolution in opposition to HB 2 to the top of the agenda because Senator Bullock and Vice President Locke have to leave early.
So
Is there
move.
such motion?
Move to do that.
Second. So there's a motion on the floor to move the resolution in opposition to HB 2 to the top of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Senator Bullock, and Vice President Locke, please come forward.
Right. Vice Command.
Alright, so, awesome. Hi, so for those of you who don't know, North Carolina's General Assembly last week passed a law titled, or numbered House Bill 2, titled the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act. It was signed into law by the governor that same day. The law, in short, denies a lot of rights to a lot of people, particularly trans people, in North Carolina. It was in response to an ordinance passed by the Charlotte City Council pretty recently that gave trans people the right to use the bathroom appropriate for their gender. At this point, that ordinance is overturned, as well as any other local ordinances regulating a lot of different kinds of anti-discrimination. This resolution, and should we read it out loud? So we'll read it out loud in a second, but this resolution is attempting to voice students' opposition to that bill and hopefully, raise awareness that this is not okay. So, pause.
Whereas the North Carolina General Assembly on March 23, 2016, during a single day special legislative session, presented and passed House Bill 2, titled the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act.
Whereas that same day, North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory signed House Bill 2 into law, and
whereas this law denies trans people the right to use the gendered public facilities appropriate for their gender and subjects these people to harassment, potential violence, and potential prosecution in the event that they do use the facility appropriate for their gender, and
whereas this law also denies entry to appropriate and comfortable facilities for children ages 8 and above, accompanied by a parent, and for some people with disabilities, and
whereas this law subjects queer and trans people to the risk of being fired, demoted, or denied promotion because of their identities, and
whereas this law further subjects queer and trans people to the risk of being denied service by a business without any statement of rationale, and
whereas this law supersedes and preempts any and all municipal non-discrimination ordinance that include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as protected categories, and
whereas this law eradicates all North Carolina municipal ordinances regulating local minimum wages, minimum levels of benefits, leave durations, child labor, and labor hours, and
whereas such a law infringes upon the ability of municipalities to govern themselves and to respond to the needs and desires of their constituents, and
whereas this law deprives all people of the right to litigate in state court against this bill or any discrimination they experience as a result of it, now, therefore.
be it resolved by the Senate of Duke Student Government that Duke Student Government, including marginalized Duke students and their concerned allies, wholly condemns the aforementioned legislation, and
be it further resolved that Duke Student Government, a representative and legislative body committed to functional and ethical legislative responsibility, further condemns the gross, unethical conduct and leadership of the North Carolina legislature that led to the bill's passage, or presentation, passage, and signature into law within a single day under dubious circumstances, and
be it further resolved that the Duke Student Government stands firmly and unwaveringly by trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming members of the Duke community, residents of North Carolina, and visitors to the state.
Be it further resolved that Duke Student Government encourages and supports the collective action of students speaking out against this law and provide the support within our capacity to empower students and student groups to effect political change or lobby against the law, and
be it still further resolved that Duke Student Government strongly urges Duke University to issue its own condemnation of the law that goes beyond its initial statement and includes
an explicit rebuke of any attempt by the state government to suppress the fundamental rights and liberties of people in public, in private, in schools, and in the workplace based on their identities.
An explicit response to the employment non-discrimination loopholes created by this bill, including the promise to amend Duke's own employment non-discrimination policy to include protection for gender expression, and
an explicit promise that it will use its lobbying capacity to push for the repeal of this law.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you guys. Seeing none, we are now in line for protecting the negative speech against the resolution. Would anyone like to speak against the resolution? Seeing none, we move to a vote.
Unanimous consent.
Yeah.
Objections? Excuse me?
Motion to move the Chanticleer referendum statute to the top of the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to move the Chanticleer budgetary statute to the top of the agenda. There's been a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, the ayes have it. Letty, Val, please come down.
So hard.
Yeah, so this is a referendum in response to the fact that after the reduced funding of the Chanticleer, there was a significant impact, and we would like to investigate the impact of that decision since it was so large.
So I can kind of go over the history. I'm Michael Pell, not every man know me. I'm a policy advisor. I was on the Senate for 2 years back when the Senate decided to significantly change the way we funded the Chanticleer. So to give a little bit of history and explain why we are where we are today, about 2 years ago, so DSG used to provide all the funding for the Chanticleer, which is the university's yearbook. Alright, so students would never get charged for it. It was just provided by DSG. We used to provide anywhere between $75,000 and $100,000 to the Chanticleer to provide free yearbooks for a large number of students. At one point, they made 2,500 yearbooks and made it available to all seniors in addition to whoever else wanted one. Then, when we reduced the funding to $75,000 a year, they were only allowed to give free yearbooks to seniors, and then other students could purchase them. But then what happened later on is we reduced their funding to about $25,000 a year. So at that point, they had to start charging students to purchase a yearbook. And so we were just providing a subsidy for people who were charging it. And instead of all of the seniors getting a yearbook, only about 400 or so decided to purchase it for an out-of-pocket cost of about $80 each. And that was then supplemented by DSG's contribution to cover the total cost of yearbooks. So what happened in general is we substantially reduced the number of yearbooks that were being produced and substantially increased the per yearbook cost. The reason why we increased the per yearbook cost is because when you produce fewer yearbooks, you lose the advantages of economies of scale. Most of the cost of a yearbook is really in the first 100 books, and once you produce more and more, the per book cost gets cheaper and cheaper because it's easy to just print more of something you've already made. So that's where we are today. We're at a point where about 400 people are buying books, and the Chanticleer is charging students for those books. So what we're proposing is a referendum. The text is on the screen and on your laptops, presumably. And we're essentially asking students to choose between two options, what they prefer. Option one, I'll read it. Every senior would automatically get a free yearbook, which would be funded by the student activities fee. Roughly $14 of each student's annual student activities fee would fund the yearbooks for the senior class, with each senior paying a total of $56 over the course of 4 years for their yearbook. There would be no increase in the current student activities fee. Non-seniors can choose to purchase a yearbook any given year for $56 each. So that's a world in which we fully subsidize the yearbook. It would cost us around $75,000 or so. This referendum is non-binding, it's purely informative, so it's not like this is actually directing action, just getting us to better understand what students want. Option two is the exact opposite. It's where we don't give the Chanticleer any money, and students can just choose to purchase the yearbook. And it says all students would have the choice of purchasing a yearbook for $120 in any given year, but that which would be about the cost. The cost actually might be higher than that if people do need funded. Students would not be required to purchase a yearbook. The $14 per student per student in annual student activities fees that would have funded the yearbook would instead go to fund other campus programs and activities. So that's the referendum, and the other sections are, section 2 is just we'll provide some information about this, make some infographics, or talk to the Chronicle about covering this issue. And then section 3, taking action, we'll use this information in direction of future decisions. So the overall question here, from a public policy standpoint, is how much do students value the yearbook? If the average valuation of the yearbook is $56, well, then it makes sense for us to provide yearbooks to all seniors. If the average valuation is $10, it obviously doesn't. Well, this question doesn't directly answer that. It's extremely difficult to actually understand what people's willingness to pay is without running some sort of sophisticated experiment, which we're obviously not going to be able to do. This will give us some of that information, and we'll hopefully be able to better direct us in our dealings with the Chanticleer in the future. So I think that's it for me. Do you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, well, I guess just to provide additional clarity to the economies of scale, we reduced the amount that we spend on the yearbooks by reducing the subsidy. We reduced our money by about half, but the number of yearbooks that was being sold reduced down to about a third of what it was before. So that's the sort of numbers we're looking at in terms of the difference between subsidizing and not.
We now move to 5 minutes of questions. Is there any questions? Questions at all?
Okay, so 2 questions, both related to the same thing under section section 3, which is taking action. So when you say the referendum decision will inform our DSG's funding decisions, so just like, do we have any like more actionable, something that we can put in there so that we don't just tell students like, even if you guys voted in support of this, it might not matter, just because we know that will like impact the way students perceive our, like how we're doing this. But the second one, which is more related to this, is that like, I know probably we talked about this a little bit, but like, even if 50% of people say, I do want this yearbook, 50% of people might value the yearbook at $56, but if 100% of people don't value it at $56, but the other 50% values it at $0, then it's not more efficient to fund all of them. So like, you could do a really complicated analysis to figure out like, if we extrapolate what we think people value the yearbook at like a break-even point. So like, if 60% of people say that they want the yearbook, then we fund it. If any less than 60% say they don't want it, then we don't fund it, and we do the second option. So like, have you thought about doing that sort of cost-benefit analysis breakdown? Or like at least create recommendations for what we should do based on the results?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess in some ways what you're saying is use this as create some sort of threshold where, let's say, above 65% of students vote support funding the yearbook fully, then we will be required to take action.
Can we include that?
I'm actually not comfortable doing that because in discussions with the Chanticleer, they're really not going to know the exact per book cost and all that stuff until they begin taking action and begin taking serious steps. Since we haven't changed their funding mechanism in any way, they haven't gone through all the hoops of figuring out precise costs. And these are the estimates they provide us. So, you know, making this binding, the goal of this is to get information from the students and then use that for future information to go to Chanticleer, and they can show this to Johnston's and whoever, who they get the yearbooks from, and then come up with a solution. I would be uncomfortable because it's really hard to just come up with a solid threshold. And maybe that's going to be a problem in determining how to interpret the referendum. But still, hopefully, that and the other data points will lead us in a certain direction.
What if you recognize?
Okay.
So we're doing any questions? DSG could just handle this sort of decision?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's a great question. Because we are not a representative group of students. First of all, we're so much more involved in the vast majority of students are. So just asking this question to the Senate wouldn't really provide us with a lot of information about how the average student values their yearbook. So what we've thought about that, I think that this is still a valuable thing. And again, this will ultimately be a question for the Senate, but this will hopefully guide that discussion.
Senator Side? Do you think that like the lack of voter turnout is going to at all affect like, I mean, I'm sure, don't you think it's going to skew kind of like how we're viewing this and like the information?
Certainly. Yeah, voter, unfortunately, the reality is you only have the voice to show up to vote, and there's no perfect way of getting a willingness to pay from students. This is kind of the best we can come up with. But that's so far. Yeah, absolutely.
So, have there been any other discussions of like other ways to kind of get data from the students about like this other than just a referendum?
I mean, so we could literally ask students how much you're willing to pay for your book, but the number they threw out, I don't think would be, since there's such little thought put into it, it wouldn't be, I don't think we'd actually use that as a genuine number. There would also be an incentive to over-report if you know there's a chance of funding it, so there's a variety of problems with that.
In the interest of like providing all the information, would it be a friendly amendment, not on this exact number, but to also put in option 1, the percentage reduction in money that we'll be spending on other programming from the student activities fees? Like if we increase our spending on Chanticleer by $25,000.
$14.
No. He wants to put it as a percentage.
In the old, yeah, no, not.
I see what you're saying. It's already pretty long, and so we would have to put the percentage reduction relative to the current funding rate. We couldn't just say the $14 represents X percent, because it's the $14 represents X percent, but then $4 or so we're already spending on certain. I think it would make it overly complicated. Yeah.
Speaker's time has elapsed unless there's a motion.
Motion to extend by 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
There's a motion to extend the speaker's time by 4 minutes. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. We have 4 more minutes. Senator Sullivan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. So I guess I was kind of very against, I'm going to prelude with the saying, I was very against funding the Chanticleer way back when we decided to not fund them anymore, or we were talking about it. But as a senior now, I'm realizing that graduation costs way too much money, and as someone who is both on financial aid and my family is like, you know, I don't know, sacrificing paying my tuition in order to attend graduation. The question I have is like, I got the idea that this is like we want students to say these things, whatever else, but do we really think that students can adequately like say what they value? I mean, you've been arguing this, but can I actually say like in a referendum like this, fully educated making a decision that we can use this in some way to like form public policy, that we can use this as a way of giving us a mandate or a decision about what like direction it's supposed to go in? Because this is just like kind of like doing a poll, but with just people who do vote. And I'm just questioning like whether or not this really is going to function well in getting us anything we want beyond just a decision we can make anyway.
Sure.
I mean, like, I feel like Paul already answered this, right? Like, what do you think is the better solution?
It's better than nothing, right? Right now we have
Like,
nothing. We have no, all we know is that about 400 students last year valued the yearbook at $80 each. That's really the only information we have. So making a decision to completely defund or to completely fund without any further information, I think would be a flawed choice. So it's not perfect, I'm not saying it is, but it's certainly better than nothing.
Additionally, the fact that it's not binding means that we can account for questions like how good do we think this data is without being bound to the decisions made.
Right.
The margins are close.
So if turnout's 10%, right, we'll be able to take that into account. If it were binding and there was record low turnout, we would be stuck with the decision that we thought was made with flawed data. So yeah, that's a good point. That's one of the reasons.
Other questions?
Okay, so 2 questions. So one, in response to my other question, you said like, okay, well, we can't really create a threshold, but at the end of the day, DSG, our Senate is going to have to create a threshold, right? Like, we're going to have to make a decision, okay, 63%, is that or is that not enough? 67%, is that or is that not enough, right? So like, we are artificially the threshold either way. I just feel like having one in the bylaw of like, okay, even if it's not on the referendum, like at least for us to go off of would be helpful because you have, I mean, you understand you have to pay when you're okay. But the other thing is that the idea of like, how much are you willing to pay for a yearbook? I actually don't think is necessarily that one. Like, I actually think that if you put like, okay, at these 5 institutions, this is how much a yearbook costs, and like, don't just pick the 5 most expensive ones, like an accurate representation, how much are you willing to pay? I actually don't think that's a terrible idea, and like have people like enter a number. But the third thing is that also seniors don't vote in this election, and freshmen vote overwhelmingly. So like 900 people voted last year for freshmen, 300 sophomores, 200 juniors. So like also there's a huge skew towards freshmen. So I also think that like we should just be aware of that.
On your question of the willingness, so the reason why, just to clarify, it's not simply willingness to pay because we're not asking students to give $14 more each year. We're asking them
Okay,
to
giving the
deduct
opportunity
from.
cost, what is your marginal willingness to be allocate your opportunity cost? But they don't really understand their opportunity cost.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that this is a better way of doing it than just asking how much you're willing to pay for your year. But keep in mind that if it's not fully funded, then it's money you're paying. If it is fully funded, then it's money you're already paying, it's being reallocated. It's not just a simple willingness to pay much. It's one of the other.
Additionally, with regards to setting a hard threshold, this isn't, despite the fact that we're asking a binary question, the ultimate funding decision is non-binary. So if we're setting a threshold, we need to ask the question of what are we setting a threshold for, or are we considering a larger number of options?
We can additionally use this data to inform a decision to subsidize.
Awesome. That's just a motion. Appreciate your time. Motion. Thank you, Michael and Jacob. So we're now on line with protecting negative speech against Chanticleer referendum statute. Everyone wants to speak up against it. Okay, seeing, wait, sorry. Senator Gilbert, you want to come to the floor?
Yeah. I'll keep it super quick. I think like what we're trying to find out is super valuable. What would be super valuable is knowing like how much students value this yearbook. I think this gives two options, and the options aren't going to tell us very much. You're asking students, do they want the money to come out of the money they already have to pay, so like a marginal cost of $0, or do they want to pay $120? And I don't think that we're really going to get any good information out of knowing whether they want to pay $120 or $0. What we really should be doing is surveying students from a broader base and really finding out how much they're willing to pay, like what the credit is for the yearbook. Any questions?
How do you plan on surveying students?
We have a great research unit that we can be using. I don't personally plan on surveying students, but those that are doing this changeover project can easily just get a more representative students that are more represented in all classes and the people that aren't in the election.
Right, any further questions?
Then like what's the problem with just doing this as well?
So I think this is putting a referendum out that isn't going to give us any useful information, so I just don't see the value. Sure, there's some value, like yes, maybe there's some sort of crazy trend where they're more interested in option 2, and that'd be really telling, but the survey would tell us that and probably tell us more.
Sorry, so what's the active harm of this that this occurs?
I don't see any active harm, so that's a good point. But I just think there's a better way to approach this.
Okay, any further questions? Yep, go ahead. So the reason why we went with this, just to understand the logic, was because we figured a survey could not get the same total number of responses that election referendum could. That's the reason. Okay. Would anyone like to speak in the affirmative with respect to the statute? Seeing none, we move to a vote. All those in favor all those in favor of voting aye on the statute say, all those in favor of approving this statute say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Moving back to special presentations from the report. Student life omnibus package. Will the service committee please move down?
Thank you. They make me feel
Is Senator Jane here?
no, she's still laughing. 9:30.
Are you doing tantrum?
I wasn't giving you a hard time before. Do you think I was being, no, I was being totally serious. I love matching things.
Okay. We're going to run through this really quick. Okay, so we're going to run through this really quick. We've got a long meeting, so the quieter where we keep it and the more efficient we make it, the better. So the first thing we have this week is a stair chair, which is a request from Duke EMS. Alana can talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, so I'm going to read a statement from EMS. Stair chairs are essentially stretchers for chairs, safe ways to move patients. We currently don't have any needs to transport patients because we don't have a stretcher, they're very expensive, or a stair chair. Because we're a non-transfer agency for all patients that need to be transported, essentially it is our job to do normal assessment and get them prepared for transport, so when an ambulance show up, we can get them in right away. Right now we can't do that because we can't transport anyone. It makes our on-scene times longer, it makes Durham County EMS do work, and delays patient care. Physically, a stair chair is a wheelchair with straps for patients, and it lets them bring them downstairs. Duke EMS covers everyone within like the Duke radius, including Duke Hospital. Most of their calls are actually for patients at the hospital, not just like drunk kids on weekend nights. So they have a full-time staff, they're an unpaid volunteer organization, and this will really help them out so they can be more effective with their QRB and response time.
We'll save questions for the end. But yeah, I didn't actually realize that they were all volunteer for us. This was like
Wait, can we vote on each one after we present it?
we have separate
There's three different
statutes, so this is a presentation, then we'll have statutes that we'll work on. So, okay. What is this? Oh, okay. Kavita's not here, so I guess I'm presenting this one. Yeah, so basically what this is this is a charging station for phones that you can lock them in a locker, basically like a small mailbox, and leave them there for an extended period of time. The idea is charging stations now require you to be there. We could put this somewhere like the BC. You would go, you would put your phone in there, lock it, go get lunch, and then come back and get it. That's basically, this is what they look like. The price is astronomical. It's $4,000 per unit. So I'm probably doing a disservice because Vita would be, you know, adamantly supporting this, but like, I think it's a question that we should ask of like, is this a need? You know, we've talked about charging stations, charging kiosks, but she was really in favor of this.
Yeah. And the other charging stations that are at UC are actually $800.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, so you
Yeah.
guys wanted more of those.
So we could get more of those, and those are the ones that are the open air ones where you just kind of plug it in, there's like 5 in a little shelf, and you can get those patterns.
Or we could just
of
buy $30
charging
for
like
chargers.
DSG or something.
Well, one charger is like $100.
Okay.
The open air ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So we met with the line monitor to kind of see how they could like fix up the process and what they need for K-bill. They basically need speakers, and they show movies a lot, so that's why an inflatable screen. The deal with the speakers right now, they currently don't own speakers, and they're having to rent from PiCaps, which is indirectly our money that they're just having to spend, whereas if we were to buy nice speakers, it would be cheaper and more like sustainable. So I don't claim to be a speaker expert, but I talked to a couple people who know a lot about music and speakers and that sort of stuff. So this is just technical, but I'll kind of explain why this speaker is what I've like selected basically. So what you're looking for in a good speaker is one that has a built-in amplifier and a limited circuit. This gives the speaker a longer life, ensures its stability, and that it's sturdy enough, especially when you're using it outdoors like it would be K-bill. The speakers are commonly broken by incorrect use of amplifiers and when the gain is placed incorrectly. This comes with a built-in amplifier, which provides a simpler interface. That basically means just turn up the speaker. It's like one knob, basically. The built-in limiter also distorts the audio and prevents the speaker from blowing out if turned too high too quickly. And this is preferable to driving too much noise through the speaker in like one instance. So this is the JBL PRX 735, which it's selling now from the vendor for $1,300. They just came out with this, so they actually have JBL PRX 635 that they're selling for $800, but the vendor isn't selling any more of those. So you'd be buying it through eBay or Amazon. So it wouldn't necessarily come straight from the producer. So that's something if we think that we'd rather buy it directly from who's making it or buy it through a secondhand vendor, that's sort of, I guess, up to you all to decide. In the inflatable screen, there were a number of options from Target and other places around. I just went with one that seemed to be sturdy and that came with a bag that they can pack it up when they're not using it to move it back into the camera and bay area, basically the waiting place where you slide your card, because that's where they have access to that. And then also with the speakers, the gatekeepers will be able to use them in the fall. So they basically use from when they start school in September, I think the first login this year is September 3rd until the end of basketball season, which there'll be a lot of students who will be around them and they can use it a lot.
Okay. I think that's about all we've got this week. Just a little update on kind of other things we're working on. Again, we meet every Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, so anyone's more than welcome to attend. We also have a form online now that we're using to get input, so a lot of these things came from that input form, which is not always online, or people that just sent me an email. So a couple updates on things that we talked about previously. The covered bus stops are looking to get too expensive. It's like $50,000, $60,000 now for a single covered bus stop. That's just too much money to spend on a box to put on the side of the road. Also, I've been in touch with UC80. Massage chairs are moving along nicely. Yeah, we'll order them for the end of the year, and they'll be placed in the BC over the summer. They prefer the BC as opposed to the West Union because the West Union is kind of more of a lively eatery type place. The BC is more kind of multi-purpose. Yeah, a couple things we're working on funding in the near future. We'll have some concerns next week. We're trying to figure out the specific locations for that. Shivani's been working on that. We have future project ideas coming at some point fairly soon. Yeah, you know what? Also hammocks, which is another Norwalk project. And solar charging tables, thanks to Kate's recommendation. We'll have those fairly soon. So we'll take any questions that you guys have about these three ideas.
Any questions?
Ciao.
Me? Okay, so can you go back first of all? So first question is about the stair chair. And I'm confused because I feel like EMS provides like a very useful service to the school. And this is something that is so like, I'm kind of curious about like why this has not yet been funded, or like who funds all the other stuff that EMS uses, like their uniforms, their like pumps, or whatever, like who funds that and why can't they fund it?
So EMS gets funded through DUPD, and then they do have annual budget funding, but usually they use that for conferences and travel and like banners and things. They haven't put in requests for large capital expenditures. They also get like one set of uniforms from DUPD, and like they have like a weird funding mechanism that's allocated every year. It tends to get really low, and they're like pretty strapped for cash always.
So follow up?
Yeah.
So have they asked DUPD for funding recently? If they did, why would DUPD say no? And if we haven't asked them, like, for all of these surplus requests, like, I get that we have extra money, but I also think that a lot of them are awesome requests, but if you just ask someone else, they'll also be happy to give the money. So for all of these, I would love to see, like, oh, these are all the people we asked first that said no, and this is why DSG is our last alternative.
Yeah.
So, like, DUPD can't fund this because...
Not in DUPD's budget is what I understand. I've been told that they've asked for these kind of repeatedly, and it's just never been a priority for them. But I also don't want to like confirm that. I'll try to get more information before we vote on this.
Any additional questions? Last question, questions?
Wait, so can you re-explain the background of how this kind of came to the surplus committee? Did they just like kind of out of the blue approach you guys about buying this?
So this one's come up like a couple different ways. There were two ideas on the two individual responses from the forum that we published. That's gone out in the last couple of times, and it's on the Facebook page. So two people recommended on there. I think Alana's brought it up to me in person a couple of times.
Mostly because I've heard it for years now.
Right, and Brian sent me an email also asking for it too. So it kind of came from a lot of different places.
Any further questions? Association.
Can I just provide some information on their annual budget request?
Sure.
Is that in order? Well, okay, so they requested $7,000 this year from us, and they requested things like tablet for patient care, 4G prepaid data for tablet, etc. So like, and like pillow, like they requested a ton of different things. So I'm not saying whether or not we funded them yet. I'm just saying that I feel like this is just something that they could have included in the annual budget and didn't because they think that DSG will fund it.
Okay. Senator Tallman.
Should surplus spending be a last resort or a forward-thinking funding process, in your opinion?
Good question. I have a different philosophy on that. I think it should kind of be a first resort of spending, actually. Maybe not the first resort, but I don't think we need to necessarily exhaust every other source of funding, like we traditionally would for some of the other,
Yeah. And I think the way that we framed how we're going to spend surplus is let's spend $100,000 by the end of the year at least. And that if this is something that's going to make a valuable difference to students on campus and affect a lot of other people and like do community stakeholders, whether it's this or something like a solar panel table, which like again, another department somewhere on this campus might want to fund. I think that as long as it's like making a positive contribution to campus, it's okay.
and the alternative is the alternative argument, right, is, well, we're going to hold on to the money because we want to use it for something else. And like, again, when I started this project, I said, I've been hearing that for 4 years now, and I've never heard the project that's going to come and use up surplus, and that's how we have, $200,000 almost. So that's what I'm trying to.
Senator.
Do either of you find it at all ironic that we're funding massage chairs, but are debating funding a chair that could like save people's lives or like help with their, extreme pain?
Yes.
Thank you for framing that as a question.
$2,000 for one chair, right?
Yeah.
And has anyone actually been close to dying because of the lack of this chair?
I mean, they.
I don't think that's like.
We also can't do that because that's a HIPAA.
We should use to judge.
Yeah. Also a HIPAA violation if we were to know that someone had, like, been close to dying, to see, like, there's no way we could talk
If
about
someone
that.
were almost died, DUPD would have gone.
Right.
So were those only questions on that section?
That's also a
Moving on. Moving on to question time, will the executive board please come down?
I've been on the front page
Oh,
of
good
Chronicle 2
question.
days in a row, I look terrible in those pictures, so.
Come back with something.
It's trending.
I agree.
It's back. Oh, you showed up.
Wait, does anyone have any questions for? Any questions at all?
Oh, do you want to Senator Terrangigassi, that'd be hilarious.
Alright,
Senator Curtis.
Yeah. So question at Tara, have you thought about yet, like, the request by Asian American students for a Asian American Studies major or certificate type program?
Thought about it a lot. So there are a few issues with it, right? So for one, it's that like the investment into building up a strong Asian American Studies program is huge, right? Like it's a huge investment. And part of the argument is that like every school invests in different types of studies, right? So we have a really great global health department. You can see it's a really great journalism school, and every school can't have like a really great investment in every type of study. And so like there are a lot of schools that do have ASA departments, Duke is not one of them. And so the argument that's often made is like, well, UNC does have a lot of ASA professors, so like students can go take classes at UNC if they want to, because like to invest that much in building up a department is kind of infeasible in itself as one. Second, it was that like there doesn't seem to be that many students that are interested, just a small group of students that are very interested. So again, building up an entire department seems less feasible. An option that is possible that I think is more of a compromise is looking at the Ames major, which is Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, and trying to create like some sort of subsection that's specific on Asian and Asian American Studies within that, which I think like is perhaps more feasible if we hire a couple more people or hire like non-tenure track faculty. So that's one thing that we're looking into. The other thing that I'm looking into, which is like very, very grassroots, is the idea of like a cultural center, which would be the same way that we have like an energy hub, or we have like the Keenan Institute of Ethics. It would be a whole center that's based around American studies. So you could have like Latinx American studies, Asian American studies, et cetera, et cetera. Now the problem there is we don't want to like lump together all minority American experiences. So those are like two compromise options that we're looking into investigating with the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs Office. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I just find it somewhat concerning to think that we could lump into a department that covers literally everything from like Morocco to Japan, give like another sub-study on stuff that's not even in that part of the world, that's Asian American.
Yeah, are you saying, so you think that having
I feel like that's,
in Ames is inappropriate?
yeah, like I feel like that's sort of like token.
Wait, so I'm a little confused as to why, like, there's I don't know, with the reasoning, like I just remember
Why
that
there's not?
to leave Ames, I just kind of assumed Asian American Studies was like something that would fall under the realm of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies.
Right, so we're saying that Asian American Studies could be a department underneath Ames.
Wait, so is there a decision note here for DSG right now, or is this something that's maybe discussed in committee and then bring to DSG?
Yeah, we can do that.
Any additional questions?
hey, I was asked.
No, but I'm just saying, like, if he's already been.
President Hopkins?
Yolanda, did you find it?
I did. Okay, so this is really important actually. UC there's student storage in Trent, big cages, so every organization can go like store things there. And they did a big clear out today. So if you're in an organization that you know did not go through and clear things out, please like talk to your people and go do that. We can put the tents in there, so we're gonna lose the tents from the office. This is really exciting. They also, the only things that we had stored in DSG were a couple of archival papers from like 2006 to 2009, which I took and I'm gonna digitize. But we also had a bunch of cable survival packs. So these were really fun, and DSG actually used to sell them before games. So there are a lot of blankets and things that like I don't really know what to do with. So if anybody has any good idea. Yeah, so this is an example of the free blanket. There were like a couple hundred of them. There were some like that's so cute things. Hand warmers. And then like we actually made really nice little goodie bags for everybody. So basically we have a lot of things that I don't really think are super necessary. Think of things to do with them. Think of ways to get rid of like all, no, they're not in the office, they're going back into storage. Think of things to do with them because clearly we're not using them actively. We cannot sell things to the student body. So try to like brainstorm things to do with like these cable accounts. Yeah.
Why can't they just be given out next year?
So we could just like give them out or like raffle them off, or we can use them as like, look, you filled out a course eval out of it. So like brainstorm things to do with them because like we want that storage space to be like actual storage space and not like this.
We should give these out.
Oh, do you want things or do you have questions?
I think for our McKinney survey with the DSGRU, we can offer a cable survival pack as a reward. Or part of it.
Just after tenting ends, high demand.
Citizens are interested.
They're gonna have to bring it to their storage unit over the summer. Store it, bring it back from their storage unit, not citizen, and bring it to cable about a year from now. Good idea. Good idea. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, and go clear out your stuff from UC.
Curtis.
Speaking of course evals, do we have a plan for some kind of course eval incentive this time around?
To fill out your course eval? No, just fill out your course eval. The iPad was like really hard. Ooh, the point is we weren't gonna offer iPads for the rest of the time.
Oh, that's not fair to anyone.
It was a one-time incentive.
Also, we don't even think they made that.
It was a one-time incentive for people to do it more regularly, and it's
Guys, can I just tell you guys a couple things before we move forward? Thing number one, there's a survey on the Duke Student Government Group on when we want to do our DUU mixed serve, because we're trying to be collaborative. So if you don't fill that out, I'm gonna find you, and it's gonna be underneath. It's pinned. The next thing that's important is Norwalk and I are on a committee on how to reveal the new Able Quad. Like they're going to be putting the plaques in hopefully by the fall, and we're on a committee on how to like do the revealing of that. So if you guys have any ideas on how you would think like students would best respond to that, definitely message one of us, i.e. Norwalk. Okay.
VP Norwalk, do you have an update on Picture Project? Like I know they
Yeah.
mentioned that during.
We have our finalists, and we're trying really hard to find a meeting time.
Okay.
Norwalk, why don't you make a graphic and release those to the student body?
Doodle it.
Okay.
And then the Social Culture Committee will be releasing its report on the disciplinary system sometime next week. It's not going to be very long, but it's very, very, very good. So.
Any further questions?
Thank
you.
One more, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Curtis.
Young trustee system, any updates on that since earlier?
And he's on.
I'm really excited about these. I'm like really excited about them. I want to take one. So we didn't have any.
Yeah, we need that.
So much. It'd be great to get them before we meet.
Go to close that one, sorry. That one, scroll down. Okay, perfect. Hi all, so I'm presenting for Spring International first. So if you guys know, I guess the freshmen who don't know what Spring International is, it's like this huge event on Main Quad every year. In fact, last year they told us, so like what they do is that you go there and you get 5 tickets where each ticket basically represents $1 and you can use it at different like stations that we're gonna fund. And last year they had around 4,000 people get tickets, so that's why they expect it again. The thing is, we're funding the things that we believe are essential items, also given the fact that this is a large amount of money. So basically what we did is that we did $3 per person for 4,000 people, which is $12,000. And so we gave them $10,500 for the student group. So this is going to be divided equally between 32 different student groups that are going to give food out to anyone who goes. And then the remaining $1,500 we use to fund one of the outside food vendors, which is once again free for the student body. It's just you go up there with a ticket. It's almost like a food truck fair. Well, once again, you wouldn't know that. Okay. Then other things we did is that they're going to have performers, so that's why we, like student performers, so that's why we funded the stage and tables. We did not fund the novel act because we were just, even though it's a great event, we're also trying to make sure that we have funding for other events this semester, and so we thought that the novel acts, either they could get outside funding for, but it wasn't exactly relevant to the International Association or the idea for International. And then we funded marketing for them as well.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we're now on to protecting negative speech against the program request. Anyone like to speak up against it? Seeing none, move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Great. And the other one today is Inside Joke. It's their big show. Last year, 600 people came. What they do is that they do the ticket office. At least that's what they told us they're doing, where it's free, but you still have to get a ticket just to reserve your spot. And last year, it's 600 people come, and all they're asking for is to rent page, which is $1,695.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, we're now on to protect negative speech against the program request. Anyone like to speak up against it? Seeing none, move to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Great. And so we have 2 new groups today. One of them is actually Michael Brunetti's new group, which is funny. So he came in with the History Union. So the History Union was a de-chartered group earlier this year. They had poor leadership. They had really no idea what's going on. Michael Brunetti came back, built an executive board. Is he here though? Okay, he built an executive board, and obviously there's a huge need for the Duke History Union on campus. They're the only history-affiliated group on campus. And so he shared with us a vision on how he's going to make sure that they don't run into those problems again. And so basically it was a no-brainer decision to approve the charter of the Duke History Union.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay then, seeing none, we're now in line for protecting negative speech against the recognition of the Duke History Union. Would anyone like to speak up against it? Seeing none, move to a vote. All in favor of approving this new group, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Great, and then our other organization is called Happy Kids, Healthy Kids. So they're an organization on campus that's working on trying to reduce childhood obesity in the Duke and Durham area. So they've already partnered with different elementary schools in Durham, and they're actually having a volunteering event this week. There's no other undergraduate association on campus that works with trying to reduce childhood obesity. They have a bunch of different activities and things that they want to do with these kids. So we thought, once again, this was a relatively easy decision.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we're now like to take negative speech against the recognition of this new group. Anyone like to speak against it? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor of approving this new group, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to PROACT, will Representative PROACT please come down to present on their behalf?
Oh, great. So I have to run.
So we, as far as
Duke East Asian Nexus Sweat, SLC. So Duke NAACP, they had flights booked for speakers to come. They said it would be $500. They waited a few weeks, booked the flights, and they were over $1,000. So FOAC and SOC voted to fund the difference for that. They overdrafted, so we voted to fund for that in FOAC. So that's just the $500 difference between what they said it was going to be and what it actually went to be. Okay. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we're now on protecting any speech against fraud recommendation.
Wait, no questions? Why did they wait a couple weeks to buy airline tickets?
So, I mean, I guess that was just oversight on their part. It was just, it wasn't, I don't know exactly what length of time it was, but when they initially requested it, the price was lower than when they actually purchased the tickets. So that's just a mistake, following the law. But they already had, they bought the ticket, and then had their event, and now they have it. Yeah. Right, are there any additional questions? Seeing none, we're now on line for protecting negative speech against FOAC's recommendations. I'd like to speak up against it. Seeing none, we're now on line for the vote. Vote aye is in favor of funding the Duke NAACP. Vote nay is to not fund it. So, all those in favor? Say aye. Say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Moving on to Duke Robotics Club. So the Robotics Club was a little more complicated. So FOAC voted 2 yes, 4 no. So what basically would happen was they tried to reallocate part of their yearly budget to a different project, and so that would actually turn out to be a $7,000 reallocation to a new project, an extra money they had. So SOC decided that they weren't going to allow them to make that reallocation, and they're going to audit that extra money. And so they're setting a new precedent, and they're going to start a new auditing system over the summer. And so FOAC agreed with their decision and decided that they shouldn't be allowed to use that $7,000 for a new project. It's just basically setting a precedent that people are going to spend their money from the beginning of the year on what they say they're going to spend it on. Yeah.
What was the rationale to yes to this from FOAC?
So that was basically, this was the first time that we're doing this, where we're saying no, they can't move their money around, so that was just some hesitation on the part of just starting right now and saying they can move their money to a different project. Any additional questions? Right, so we go to okay, then seeing no, we now want for protecting negative speech with FOAC's recommendation. Would anyone like to speak up against it? Seeing none, you need to vote. To clarify, vote aye is in favor of not funding the Robotics Club, and vote nay is in favor of funding it. So, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Can I get a hand raise count? All those in favor, say raise your hand. Just a point of clarification, this is about reallocating money within their budget already. So we're not taking away their funding, we're just not letting them move their funding from the project they said they were going to fund at the beginning of the year to a different project. All those in favor of approving FOAC's recommendation, please raise your hand. All right, all those opposed, raise your hand. The ayes have it. Moving on to the last showcase. Okay, so we voted no unanimously to not fund their event. Basically, they just submitted too late to SOC and too close to their event, so they can never have their hearing. It was for food for their event, and so SOC didn't approve it, pretty standard, and then we agreed with the decision and they paid it. Okay, are there any questions? Seeing none, we're going to make a speech against the FOAC's recommendation and consider against it. Seeing none, we usually vote. Going to clarify once again, the vote aye is in favor of not funding the Washington Showcase, the vote nay is in favor of funding it. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Lastly, so Relay for Life is an annual event. We voted unanimously yes to fund everything except for the inflatables, because we generally don't fund inflatables as they're very expensive and non-essential. For this event specifically, they were $552. We never fund inflatables. So We voted unanimously, no not for the labels, but yes to fund the event. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we're now just going to make a speech. I'd like to speak up against it. Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to Senate President Fortune Worldwide Hopkins and Senator Judy Jane, will you please come down and present the blocks to the legislative session?
Okay, I'll just look at
So,
yeah.
you can explain it.
Can we go back to the slides by any chance?
So there you go.
So, locks here are the phone charging lockers, and so these are just, each unit has 6 lockers where you can securely charge your phone, so it can be placed at the DC, West Union, Maple libraries, we're unclear, those are suggested locations I thought of. So there's a keypad where you can like create your own PIN, or you can they can do a Duke card swipe for us, and there's a little like TV on the top where we can advertise our own events and like promote DSG. So like, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. They are pretty pricey, but also like we have these forever. Yeah. Like I don't really know what else to say about that.
Any questions? Vice President Lucaci?
Okay, so just a little math, right? So we're getting, what, 5 of these?
Yeah.
And there's 6 charging stations on each.
Yes.
So that's 30 chargers. And we're spending $19,000 on them. So we're spending close to $700 per phone charger.
Yeah.
So you can buy a phone charger for like, what, like $30 online?
Probably.
So why are we spending like, what, 20 times that?
Because, so a lot of the time, so I guess what you're saying is like, why don't we buy it with chargers kind of thing, like compare that? I don't know, maybe.
I mean, theoretically, like, we could buy like 2,000 phone chargers for this amount,
But
right?
this also is not a one-time thing, like it's gonna be there for, like until they stop working and they say a minimum of 10 years.
Right, but you can still keep, like, these phone chargers aren't gonna die a year. Like, I can use the same charger for 3 and it's been fine, so it just doesn't make sense to be spending this much money on them.
But they're also just like, if you forget your charger, like what do you do?
Right, which is like, but like, I still don't understand how this is different from.
It's the same thing, so in the VC right now, you see those UCA like charging stations or whatever.
No, like I
It's the same thing for
like I
those.
understand what it is, but why can't we just do, like, just have straight up chargers there? Like, and a power strip, because it's.
Because people aren't gonna wanna wait there for their phone. If they wanna get lunch or something, they're not gonna wait there for their
Oh,
phone.
this is like a locker.
This is like a locker, so they locks it, so they can like keep their stuff safe. And it fits tablets too. So, I don't know if that changes anything.
What about-
It's different, but it's still expensive.
What about when iPhone chargers change, like in the next evolution?
Ooh, I don't know, you got me there. Like I'm hoping it don't change, but I'm also hoping that like there's like a USB or something inside the machine. Alright, rated it, Basil, yeah.
Motion to recognize citizen
Yeah, also we don't have to do that, like you're gonna get confirmed you've been nominated, so.
Can I slide into the DM soon?
Just maintain. My question is, if these things lock, what prevents someone from just leaving their stuff in there overnight?
Well,
What?
they're not that big, like it fits a tablet at most.
Okay, but like still, like if they forget something, like I'm just curious,
Like
what are the actual mechanisms and like who's gonna regulate someone not just leaving things there overnight? Like,
So you can either do a Duke card swipe or a keypad, but then there's also remote access. So anybody say or even DSG can have access to your laptop, like open our all lockers at one point. So like you have that access like from your laptop.
So, what is y'all's game plan for the people not will maintain these, because they will need maintenance and regulate it?
I haven't thought of that.
Which
I
is
just
fair.
bringing this idea.
That's totally fair, I'm just curious.
I don't think that, I don't know how big this maintenance job would be. but maybe a member of DSG could do it. Like, if we got these next year, like, I would take this, I don't care, like, I wouldn't mind taking this on, like, maybe somebody in UCA could do it, and like, just have access to it as well. So,
I'm just
either
thinking
there's,
like someone like puts their laptop in there and they lose their wallet, they don't have their Duke card.
oh, that's fair, like, maybe like, so when we, like, the DSG office is locked, and we go to UCA and like get a key, so maybe a similar,
Similar sort of
Thing.
deal, right?
yeah.
I just want to point out, like, there seems to be like this interest in purchasing this item, but I feel like this would be a relatively easy project for either a student group or like some other organization to construct at a very reduced price, given that all it requires is a locker and an outlet in the back of the locker. And then you just give them your phone.
But like, how would we go about getting these groups to make these?
I'm not saying, I'm not proposing this idea, I'm just saying that the astronomical cost, just, there's so many other options. You could pay like a handyman.
That's such a good idea.
So I'm actually looking, there are such things as cell phone lockers. And I don't know how much this holds, but it's about $600. Right?
Is it secure? 'Cause
I mean,
pretty
they're
sure.
lockers.
But like, a lot of times they say lockers, but they're literally just like copies. Like I Googled a lot.
President, I have to look more into it.
I was wondering if you guys would be open to maybe doing like a informal straw poll with the Senate about whether or not they want to consider this portal that you guys brought up or the UCAE chargers that have already been purchased but branded with DSG. So like that same brand, just because I feel like they perform the same function and those have been highly used and maybe they would be more in a price point that you guys would be comfortable with. I don't know if that's something you want to consider, just.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's fine. We can do
I mean,
straw poll.
it's on you guys.
Speaker's time's elapsed unless there's a motion to increase the speaker's time. Is there such motion?
Move to extend the speaker's time by 3 minutes.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion to extend the speaker's time by 3 minutes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 3 minutes, you have.
Okay, can we do a straw poll then for people who want this particular model of charging? Cool. And the current UCAE, thanks dinner, thanks. And the current UCAE like station things.
Or
Or what? Yeah, go for it.
Would you consider, like, honestly, why can't, you know how we have the mailboxes in the post room? Like, you could literally drill holes in the back of those, like, get like a bunch of outlets there, and like, maybe you could have like a charging wall, like a long.
No, like, I'm totally down for that, just like who's gonna do it?
No, yeah, what if you have like a charging like wall?
I mean, like, have to be, like, a team that has to do it,
Or the software task force.
Yeah, what if you paid someone like $10,000 to like make a wall and charge it, and like.
Any additional questions?
The lockers and the edge are kind of like that idea, right? They're lockers that lock with outlets in them, in each locker, so.
Chris, how do I think the service committee has time to build something for you?
I'm not.
Sorry.
Senator Guerrero?
Like, all of the money we're thinking of putting into this, could we just like, yeah, so would it be possible to like, just take all the money we would use to buy these like portable charger things and actually buy like the $30 Apple chargers and just get so many of them? And then in like Perkins and the BC and West Union have like the desk where like you put your Duke card down and like rep them.
Yeah, no, this was just an idea that like somebody brought and I like thought they were cool, so like, like obviously I'm looking for things. If we think it's a lot of money, like obviously we don't have to go for it.
What's going on right now? So we're talking about.
So, I know that there's already been some talk with like funding various engineering groups for robotics
For
techniques.
cell phones.
What would be your position on taking the same amount of allocated money and telling these groups,
Want to buy?
build us X number of lockers and you get the rest of the money? Because
I don't think
that would not only encourage them to lower their costs as much as they can in building this for us, it also would give whatever's left in engineering.
I mean, I just don't think there's like a mechanism to
I don't think we
actually
can.
do that, right?
Is
Like,
that right?
we have 4 weeks left in the semester, right? Like, is that really the best use of our money?
I mean, like,
we
can allocate this for next year, like, we can have a statute that says next year this will be
So
dispersed.
same problem though, is there like a mechanism other than Hack Duke where people could actually sit down and approve this kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Like, and how do we know they're not gonna just take the money and then use it for their own project? I don't wanna say
I
that
mean-
they're going to do that, but like they could.
Sure, so, I mean, I just see it as like, the way it would work, like most contract type situations, is they don't get the money to like build it, like,
But then where are they gonna get the money to like buy the material?
right, so we can start them off with like 5,000 maybe, or some reasonable estimate of how much they think it would cost.
$100.
I just like,
For all of them.
like, I just don't think that like contracting a group is like the best route to do this. Like, I would either, we can do this, we can do the U-state thing, or like look into something else. I just don't think building something is a feasible option to be looking into.
Senator Shane? Could we make like a contest with like prize money next month, like engineering groups?
That's not really like in the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Is or is not a good idea.
We'll take amendments. Amendments are always in line to this specifically, but I don't want to spend this time like going off on hypothetical situations about some engineering competition.
The chair recognizes John Grant as privileged to speak.
I just want to say, like, it's a great idea, your hearts are in the right place, it makes sense, but like, what do we do if we hire a group and then halfway through they decide like, you know, we don't want to do this anymore, they put in all this cost, do we still pay for it, like if everyone's doing this second thing, it's sort of, it's way too complicated, I agree with Tara,
That's just not
deal with
something
this.
that I'm really.
The speaker's time has elapsed. Thank you. Unless there's a motion to increase the speaker's time. There is not. Seeing none, we're now on to protect negative speech against legislation. If anyone would like to speak up against the budgetary statute? Seeing none, move to. Vice President Kaji?
I'll speak up against it. Okay, so yeah, just a few things. So,
JB, you can come out.
yeah, sure. I'll have to give it a brief. Okay, yeah, so just a few thoughts I've noted down about what I think about this. So the first is I think per unit cost is way too high. Like we're spending, what, $650 for a charger. I just think there's a lot better ways to spend money. Two, like we don't really know anything about maintenance. Like these things are like kind of complicated. Like I don't know what maintenance costs are gonna look like. It could be like a pretty high annual recurring cost. Like, it could break. There's only 6 chargers in each of them. Like I don't think that many students would use them. I also don't think that it's like that big of a problem, right? Like I think that people carry around chargers with them. Like I plug my phone in every night, wake up and like last the day. Like I don't think there's like a chronic issue of students' iPhones or like tablets dying in the middle of the day while they're in the VC. And if they do, they probably just have their charger on them. I agree with whoever said this would be like a really cool student project. Like it's something DSG STF could take on. It's something that would get funds through like engineering student government. And like, yeah, if it falls through, that just means you don't have any charging kiosks, which is like the status quo. I don't think there's like overbearing demand for this kind of thing. And then like finally, I just kind of fundamentally disagree with the mentality that's been adopted that like the service committee wants to spend as much money as quickly as possible. Like we have a really great opportunity here. I don't want to squander it. I think we can be like really smart, really methodical with our money. And so, yeah, I appreciate this.
Great. Thank you. We're now on to 5 minutes of questions. Anyone have any questions for Vice President Mugashi? All right. Thanks, JP. All right. Would anyone like to speak in the affirmative? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor of approving this budgetary statute, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? All right. Like the budgetary statute. This is the chair.
What am I doing?
The chair.
Oh. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay. Yeah, so I think you've really heard what I have to say about the chair in particular, but I do have some updates from the EMS department, or student organization, just as to how they operate. So they do get their budget from DUPD, but DUPD's budget's really small, so their budget is also very small. They get $20,000 a year. That is supposed to cover particularly medications, which themselves would be a lot of money. It doesn't include legal fees, tech fees, uniforms, vehicle and builder management, which the students generally absorb to at least some degree. They are missing like central lighting, don't have a map of the district, don't have like things at base because of the lack of money and funding, and there are certain rules and regulations about like where they can get certain materials, particularly ones that they're using for like patient interaction. I don't know anything about medicine, but it's very expensive, and $20,000 a year is a pretty small budget. And the reason why they haven't gotten some more capital goods is because DPD just doesn't have the budget to spare. So I think that in kind of the grand scheme of our surplus, like we did fund massage chairs, and funding a chair that could be really useful and really helpful in preserving someone's health and easing the burden on Durham emergency services, making it so the relationship between Duke Health and Duke University is even stronger than it already is, are all positive things that come through a pretty limited amount of money.
Any questions? At all? Alright, seeing none, we're now on the statute and seeing none, move to the vote. All those in favor of approving the budgetary statute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I think this would be like a really efficient use. Obviously, a lot of people tent, there are a lot of people in K-Ville for basketball games that are not tenting, there's a lot of people around. They can be a really good look and generate more buzz. Also with gatekeepers in addition to line monitors using this, I think it's worth it, and I think it is something that would be definitely appropriate for us to fund.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're now on the speech. Thank you, Senator Caldwell. Any speak against it? Nope. Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the budgetary statute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Why am I looking at? Executive seems like the
Yes, yeah. Okay, can you open up the PowerPoint and
When someone in this room is passed out in the door and needs to get taken down the stairs, the chirping will never come out.
Try getting someone out of here. Yeah. Even Jay would have to hear you.
This is so exciting. Okay. Hi everyone. So we are doing restructuring of the Senate. Over the past several years, over the past few months, we've seen a lot of restructuring plans. We've put a lot of time and work into this one to make kind of small changes to Senate that could result in tangible and large-scale differences in our efficacy, efficiency, and trust from the student body. So, in short, these changes will make Senate committees flexible. You'll be able to work on multiple committees. You will still have a primary committee appointment, but you'll be able to kind of flow in and out of them, sit on more than one at a time, thereby encouraging more innovation, independent projects, and cross-committee collaboration. So the text of the change is up here. As you can see, we're not proposing any changes to the size of Senate. And you can kind of see we still have our standing committees, same names aside from Facilities, the Environment, and the Arts, which we changed months ago. But the committee composition shall be modifiable. So there's no set minimum and no set maximum number of students sitting on a single committee.
So just to clarify, like even if we were to restructure the size of Senate later, like next year potentially, this wouldn't have any effect on this plan.
Yeah. So the overview of this plan is, like I said before, senators are going to still be elected for a committee, but it's going to be their primary committee. Instead of being kind of resigned to working on just that one issue area, they'll be able to be more flexible.
Yeah. So think like a consulting firm kind of where you speak with people about projects you're interested in, and if you find like a mutual like interest in a certain project, you join with another VP, even if maybe that's not your primary VP.
Yeah. So how's this going to work in practice? I'll show you some scenarios in a second, but in general, it's going to require some more intense project management and attendance tracking, all mechanisms we already have in the bylaw and haven't used in the past. So that's going to include a global attendance spreadsheet. We're going to be looking at more kind of concrete performance reviews. We already have evaluation standards outlined. And those will be conducted by your primary VP unless designated otherwise. But a lot of these changes are, like I said, pretty small scale, and you can see that in the work. So this is what a potential global attendance sheet would look like. You would still be required to go to one of your primary committee meetings a month, but you would have some more flexibility otherwise. So say Marco, Basil, and I were all on the Academic Affairs Committee as our primary appointment. So we were elected as senators to Academic Affairs. So that means that we all have to go to at least one Academic Affairs meeting a month. But this is a weekly schedule. So say in this particular week, I was working on a project that had to do with equity in the residential system. So like the identity graphs. And that didn't really include Academic Affairs, so I just go to other ones. But those VPs mark me down as having attended. Basil just goes to Academic Affairs, which is where he was elected. And Marco decides to go to multiple committees and work on multiple projects. So this is kind of the idea of how that attendance tracking would work. Again, we're already supposed to track attendance inside your committees. That does count towards your attendance. It's a mechanism that's just underutilized. So what does this look like in practice? I'm going to run through some scenarios as to what this is going to look like potentially in the Senate. So this is the, oh no, you can't see something closer. Well, the status quo.
It's a metaphor.
Status quo committee composition. All right, status quo committee composition is such. When your Senate is filled to a max, you have 60 senators. You can see committees of 5 basic senators. All right, pay attention.
Order.
So, the most likely outcome that we can imagine coming out of this kind of fluid committee model is this, where you have some senators jumping from committee to committee because they find whether it might be their leadership style not meshing with their VP, the projects they care about change, or you might have some students who want to sit on more than one committee at a time. It just allows for a little give and take, allows for some change over time, some change over the year, particularly if you are very project-oriented, as you should be, and kind of have an idea that you want to see from start to completion. And then want to kind of start something new in a different area. Another possible outcome would be like in the case of a campus crisis or a big change being made on campus. So say there's another homophobic or racist or sexist or terrible event on campus, and for the next month or two, everyone really wants to work on a response to that, whether it's a long-term response, issuing a resolution, or working with campus constituents and identity affinity groups to fix that. In that case, I can imagine a bunch of people coming to Equity Outreach just for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Might decide that they're really passionate about a particular issue and decide to stick with it. You could also see the same thing happen during the curriculum committee, and everyone might, or during the curriculum committee, we're going to kind of the final stages that a lot of people might want to work on academic affairs. If Duke decides to be like, okay, we're going to change the House model again, maybe people are going to flood to Resolution. It allows for some change, some variation, and again, for senators to kind of be more individualized in their work with DSG. And then a final scenario would be like the disinterest scenario, where like in this scenario, for instance, Equity and Outreach has nothing to do because Duke is on the forefront of inclusivity, and there's just no project that Senate wants to work on at the moment. In that case, everyone works on different projects, that's fine. You still have a VP, you're not getting rid of the committee. The VP will still have work to do, and it's still your primary committee appointment. So once a month, you still have to go to that meeting, and you still are held accountable to those issues primarily.
And if a project were to like pop up in Equity and Outreach, we would hope that like the senators who are elected as like your main committee, like you would have to prioritize Equity and Outreach in some way, shape, or form. So maybe not like work on it as like your only project, but like you would have to like show some type of accountability.
So how does this work? And how does this address the issues that we always see within DSG, within Senate? So first, it addresses accountability. The way I perceived it as a VP and the way I perceived it as a senator was the reason why people weren't really following through on things was just because they didn't care about them, they weren't passionate about them. And this saves that problem purely because it allows people to actually engage with issues that they care about. Moreover, most projects don't actually make the Senate floor. A lot of the things that you're all working on, no one else here knows about because they don't require legislation, they don't need a vote, and they're just projects. So this allows for a more integrated organic model that will let senators really work on those types of projects, allowing it to be more focused on discussion and debate and action, and make it so there's more cross-committee work and communication. Again, you'll still have more things like special presentations and reports. We're going to expect to see more concrete or tangible outputs, whether that's like, look, we proposed this policy to administration earlier today, now we're going to show you that presentation, or if it's we want feedback on a project we're all working on together. Again, it also held senators accountable to attend for meetings and holds VPs accountable to actually manage projects and keep track of attendance of other senators. So also addresses engagement. Like I said before, this is to make people actually care about what they're doing, be passionate about DSG again, and make sure we're doing what students actually care about. You're going to feel more ownership of what to work on. If you kind of feel beholden to a project, you're more likely to see it through, more likely to make sure that if it's not something that can be wrapped up in the semester or a year, that it's passed on. And there's been a philosophy of engagement behind that.
So like honestly, the way that we're approaching it is it's a supply and demand kind of thing. So if say E&O has a lot of things going on and there are people who are really excited about E&O sitting on DRA and DRA is not really doing much that semester, then we have a more efficient Senate if all of those DRA senators who are very excited about E&O go work on E&O projects, and then if something with DRA comes back up, they can go back and they can work on DRA projects. It's basic supply and demand, and it honestly like keeps us efficient. I can probably ask like a ton of senators out here who've been here for like a year or multiple years, like how many times have you been sitting on a committee and have had no projects to work on because like simply there's just nothing going on in res life or DRA or E&O or whatever. So this fixes that problem.
And this also will decentralize power and make it so senators can take more initiative, and innovation is kind of the next thing that this model will really allow for. Not only will we be able to better address senator needs and student needs by allowing you to work on projects that really matter, that kind of undercut more than one committee. Things like orientation week or student conduct, or like bringing campus life back to campus. Things that really don't belong under only one VP or one committee's domain, and really should have the input of all these different areas of campus life and of the undergraduate experience. It'll also allow for independent projects that are kind of senator-driven to make it to the Senate floor, and allow for innovation in the sense, again, ownership and engagement, but things that are bigger scale and do require input from multiple sources or multiple committees. So we're going to also address some possible concerns you may have. Number one of which is that you might think that this model will allow senators to kind of shirk their responsibilities, not show up to meetings. That's what attendance is for. That's what that spreadsheet that I showed you is for. You're all on DSG for a reason, and it's because you care about this university and you care about campus action and the ability to create change. And we need to change the culture of DSG if we actually want to make those changes happen. And if you're not showing up to Senate, that's why we added in instructions to the Senate Judiciary Committee of when a senator should be removed. And quite frankly, if you're not showing up, then there are other people who want to be here who would do a better job.
And if you guys think that every year we talk about attendance and we never follow up on it, and you don't think that that's going to happen next year while Alana's the VP, you obviously have never met Alana. Alana is literally going to be on top of this 100% of the time, and she's going to make sure that this is like that people are accountable.
Yeah. So another way that might come up is how at-large senators will work. So there are a couple of ways this could go because at-large positions are really big in the bylaw. And the way we interpret this as happening is that at-large senators will actually be at large. For those of you who interviewed, we had you specify 3 committees that you would be happy to work on, and that's how it would still work. You would apply, you would list the committees you want to work on, and the selection committee would say, like, okay, your primary appointment is going to be with this VP on this committee, but you're still going to be able to sit on other ones, and you'll still have some flexibility. That means that if you are running at large because you really want to be on DSG, because you really care about voter engagement, we might put you on DRA to see if that voter engagement transfers to the broader political sphere, not just Dukes. But you'll be able to kind of choose how that operates, choose within DSG's internal structures, internal committees as well. The size of committees are also not defined. This means there's going to be no more arguing within the exec board of everyone wants one senator because that's not going to be on everyone's committee, or somebody really doesn't want to cut someone, but somebody has too few spots. Because this allows for flexible size and flexible ranges. Committees either have greater need, greater interest, or greater quality of applicant will be able to take those students more easily. And how does ad hoc fit into this plan? This makes ad hocs even all that more important. They really are able to manage projects and work on policy within an issue area that they care about the most.
So honestly, the way we envision it is we envision having ad hocs be specifically for one committee. They're working on that exact committee, so say people are an ad hoc on academic affairs, they're interested in the project in E&O. We would prefer that ad hocs stay within academic affairs, but that's something that we would also be open for discussion.
So that's kind of all we have to present to you. I know our time technically has run out, but if we could have kind of an allocation for questions.
So that's our for questions. In which case, we begin with Senator Curtis.
Overall, I think this is a really well thought out plan. Thank you for making a great presentation on it, but I'm a little bit concerned that perhaps if senators could just kind of jump committee to committee every week, even if they have to attend one of their own every month, that they won't have the opportunity to build the knowledge of the institution that that committee has to work with. And that overall, Senate's connections to administration will weaken.
Sure, so that's a really good point, in terms of kind of expecting someone to hop around. I think in practicality, that's really unlikely to happen, aside from positions like pro temp or someone who's really into internal affairs, who might be best suited to hop around committees. And maybe some of you will want to spend those like first month or so on Senate kind of exploring all there is to offer. But I really don't see that as being a potential hazard. In the case that that senator doesn't really know what projects to work on, again, they still have that primary appointment. I think we're open to amendments if you wanted to kind of increase the number of meetings you have to go to, maybe make it rather than 1 a month, like at least 6 a semester. Like that's also totally valid, especially because some committees meet more than once a week, you know. But it's kind of whatever you want to make it. I do think that senators who are that disinterested won't actually run for a committee and will not specify a single committee. There's a reason why it's like your primary domain, it's because we expect you to care about it and know about it or want to know about it.
And if anything, the way that we saw this was that it would create more of a broad institutional understanding that kind of DSG, like a lot of senators don't necessarily have the access to.
Yeah, especially for administrators who you might not know to reach out to for certain things, who are kind of under the radar, like middle management.
Yeah, exactly. Much better than about you.
Yeah, kind of similar to that question. I'm thinking that if you're a senator and right, you're elected to a particular committee, and then you decide to switch committee for whatever reason, right? Being like forced to attend your primary committee once a month might actually be a bad thing, right? Because you might be working on like a series of projects for one committee that like requires you to go to that committee meeting every week, and then kind of being forced to go to a committee meeting on a project to talk about projects that like you're not working on, just kind of like seems counterproductive to me.
Yeah, so that's something that I, personally agree with, and I know of like several senators who would have rather just kind of upped and switched committees entirely, which is why we do have a provision in here about like transferring primary committee status and transferring primary VP status, which is like via written request from the VP. That said, I think again, like this is a fairly modifiable plan, and it is up to the VP's discretion of like what constitutes a meeting and how often those meetings are held per month.
The reason we included this was because we thought that if there were the issue where like maybe everybody leaves E&O because like disinterest or just like lack of projects or whatever, and then E&O all of a sudden has an influx of projects and stuff, we would need people to work on that. So that's almost more like a contingency. Then again, we are flexible too.
Yeah. Tara?
So, I know we talked about this last week, but I see like a lot of problems with this system. I wrote a couple of them down, right? So for one, like, I do think that attendance would be really difficult to check. I never taken attendance for my own committee. I think that you're going to see a lot of students running for what they're going to perceive to be the easiest positions to get on DSG, knowing that they don't have any real interest in it to work on something else. I think you're going to see, like on my committee, I spend at least the first 20 minutes literally just getting advice from my committee members on academic affairs projects, not because they have a lot of experience with those themes, those topics, and working with some admin. And so like, if they're not at my meeting, I can't get advice from them, and I don't build the institutional knowledge that I need to get from them. To talk about things, also like, it hurts my committee when I meet people in the meeting, right? Because now I have to explain concepts from scratch that I've been working on for the whole semester with my committee, and now I have to like spend an extra 5 minutes talking about stuff, or talk about stuff with my committee that half the people don't even understand. So like, those are all the reasons why I think committee structure is going to be a lot less efficient. But also, and this is like the main question, is I see 3 types of DSG senators, right? Like the ones that are basically not involved, that don't do any project work. There are some of those, right? People who like work on their one committee and are interested in the one committee, and people who want to go above and beyond and work across committees. Like there are tons of people in the stream that have offered to work on AA projects, and that's awesome, right? So I think that in the status quo, we make it difficult for that uninvolved senator to be uninvolved. And then we like cater to those other 2 groups, and like there's nothing that precludes a senator, like Michael Volchek wants to work on Duke 101, there's nothing that precludes him from coming to my meeting or working on Duke 101. But in this system, you do allow the least involved or like laziest senators to get away with it, because they can still, even if they have to attend 1 meeting per week, don't have to work on projects, because I'm not gonna ask every senator what they're working on in every committee. So I do think that like, why in the current system are we not catering to those like over-eager like students? What's precluding that? Sorry, that was super long.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to go through like systematically through your questions.
At this moment.
Move to extend the question time by 2 minutes.
Motion increase the speaker's time by 5.
Can we also point out that,
Second.
I just want to point out that next week, I believe we're starting annual budget, and this is going to be like, I don't see this like going through unanimously. So like, if you have questions, ask them now versus next week, because next week is going to be very long.
So on that note, there's been a motion to increase the speaker's time by 5 minutes. It has been seconded. Also, to build up upon what Basil said, annual budgeting will take a lot of time, so if you have any concerns or challenges with this piece of legislation, act now. As such, we will now vote on the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, Tara, I'm gonna try to go through and systematically answer those.
Yeah.
Starting with the,
Do you want me to just read it again?
Yeah.
The first one was like, I think attendance is really short to do.
yeah, I'm just gonna answer that. So that's our fault. I have my Senate committee VP like attendance sheet that I pretty much write like who I notice is missing. We have 24 people in my committee like group me and Facebook group, and we have about 17 people show up regularly, and we meet every other week, and I track attendance. And that's in the bylaw that stipulates VPs have to do committee meetings count as attendance. I think it's really easy to fill out a Google form. I think that's a responsibility inherent of VPs to actually do. That said, tracking like a global attendance form could be finicky, and yeah, we definitely would have to kind of iron out the kinks. But that's on the EVP and on the Internal Affairs Committee, whoever that may be in future years, to figure out. And I think the second biggest concern that you had that I've kind of been thinking about is that like unengaged senator who just like fundamentally like might not care about what they're doing. And this is something that I kind of think is more, again, philosophical in terms of like, the reason why someone is not doing anything in DSG is because they don't feel a sense of ownership, and they don't feel a sense of like, what I'm doing is important, what I'm doing is going to make a difference, because like, why would you want to be on DSG and spend 4 hours in meetings on Wednesday nights if you're not going to be participating? So I think it goes back to the fact that like those senators just don't feel like they have something to do or they have something important to contribute. And I think kind of allowing them more power to customize their own DSG experience, customize the projects they're working on, and tailor them specifically, would kind of solve that problem to at least a certain extent. Of course, you're always going to have people who are more quiet or people who don't really want to participate, but I think this mitigates that pretty largely. And then in terms of, I'm like clouding that now. Can you read the third one that you said?
Yeah, that I think like it hurts the committee structure when you have a rotation of people coming in and out, right? You don't build constitutional base to answer proper questions, and I think it makes the committee run dramatically slower.
Okay. Yeah, so that's definitely like a very valid concern. I know like we meet, meets like every other meet every other day type of thing, and we definitely do a lot of catch up. But I do think that if we're more project focused, we have specific teams of people working on projects, they're probably going to be coming every week anyway, or going to be updating you in another capacity. Something we didn't implement this year were like evaluations, performance reviews, or many special reports and presentations. A way to mitigate that would be to have senators essentially required to somehow report back on whatever project they're working on, whether it's through like actually using the spreadsheets and making internal affairs responsible for that, or if it's another mechanism like bringing back the synergy committee or whatnot. Where's Andy? That would allow students to actually kind of integrate with that better. So I definitely do think that like kind of happening on projects is a big thing. But the way I see this being most used, and like maybe this is the case, is that you will have kind of coalitions of senators being like, okay, we're going to work really intensely on orientation week. We're from 6 of the 7 committees. We're going to all go to our own committee meetings a week, sometimes bring buddies, sometimes we might miss it because we're working separately, and then we're going to give like a kick-ass presentation to the Senate about it. And again, maybe that's me being very optimistic, but I don't think that people are going to rotate for the sake of rotating, because I don't think people join DSG for the sake of just being under.
I also, Sarah, to your point of like the different senators and the fact that we're not catering to like the senators who are going above and beyond, I think that this makes it, like, I think that the reason we're not catering to them is because like they're already very efficient senators, and the reason we're trying to cater to the senators who like maybe surround and don't do projects is because if we can get them to like the 2nd or 3rd level of senator, then DSG becomes like way more efficient. So I think like that's like kind of part of the goal of doing this. And like people like obviously like one of the number one like things that people have with DSG is that we're not efficient. This is what we're trying to do to fix that. So.
Any further questions?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that at the end. They're basically ad hoc senators would preferably be fixed in their certain committee unless they have a good reason for working on like a cross committee platform. But then again, we're also flexible if people feel like ad hoc. Curtis.
I definitely do want to say, like, we are open to amendment and adding in different strategies, whether this might be like adding in a provisional thing or adding in like actually concrete and codified tracking mechanisms. Like, I have a couple proposed, so. Yeah.
I missed this earlier. Did you like change the number of at-large senators with respect to like committees, or did you keep it the same?
So it'd be the same structure. Say we fill, everyone runs in this election and we only have 12 at-large spots. Then those 12 at-large senators could go to any committee in any capacity. So like if all 12 of them want to do and nobody else like wants them on their committee, then great, there are 12 like primary appointments are to
At this time, the speaker's time has elapsed. However, I do recommend that you use the speaker's time by 2 minutes to hash out any differences you have. Is there such a motion? Not as to the left. Quiet. Is there such a motion? Said motion. For how many minutes? 1. Sure. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion on the floor to increase the speaker's time by 1 minute. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it.
Are there any other questions? Or I can monologue.
Monologue.
Wait, really? Does nobody have any questions? We thought about reconfiguration for like yes, Norwalk.
What do I do if no one shows up to my committee 1 week?
Have they shown up all month? Or so the way I would respond.
Let's say theoretically no one runs for facilities, environment, and arts, and we just put people on it at large because we need to put people on that committee. So they're really not that interested in it in the first place.
No, 100%.
Interesting.
Got it.
So one that would be when you would use an ad hoc appointment. Something that could work for F&E particularly would be to have like whoever's president of AU BizArts, or the creative director of DIDA, or the work study students of the Arts Annex, all the ad hoc committee or ad hoc members, they can interact with you. You also still do have a legion of 5 people who have to do things and have to report to you because you're evaluating them, and if your evaluation is poor, then they recommend to the Senate Judiciary Committee for removal, in which case we open the floor for more senators to serve on your committee, to be appointed at any time.
Like we were saying, like your main committee is your main priority. You're allowed to go and work on other projects, and like you can like only go to 1 committee meeting a week for your main one, but you have to prioritize that. So Norwalk, if you just like text all your senators one day that nobody came to my committee today, I need everybody here now. Like we need that kind of accountability in Senate.
And like my expectation for this is there's like 4 of you who I know would have loved to be on both like E&O and services because it makes the most sense for the projects we're working on, or E&O and academic affairs, or Res Life and academic affairs. So I think that's what it's really interesting. Shelby?
Motion to extend the speaker's time by 2 minutes.
Second. All right. There's a motion on the floor to increase the speaker's time by 2 minutes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
What about setup of committee times? So since we wouldn't be able to have everyone in Senate set up committee times for a committee they want to visit per week, what if you would like a couple different committees, but you didn't have an input when the committee time would be and it's during class?
Yes, so that's definitely another kind of point of where it would work out. We would have to really make use of the DSG calendar, hang up a calendar on the outside of our office every week. In terms of when we meet, again, committees can meet for however long they need. I know I've had committee meetings 5 minutes before Senate or 5 minutes after Senate. And if that's kind of what it takes to get everyone's input, even if it's like a straw poll and you have to do a lot of updates via email or discussions via Skype, that's something that like obviously is unfortunate, but would have to accommodate. Also, nobody has class at like 8 in the morning or on the weekends. And like I know people would hate me. Everyone hated me when I tried scheduling brunch meetings for but like it definitely is still an option. And I don't know if anybody here has like class conflicts, but definitely something that like a couple doable and like massive doable.
What, like, you mentioned that your priority would have to be like your main committee, but what measures, if any, would be put in place to ensure that priority is like actually a thing?
So the number 1 thing that we were talking about was having at least one. You have to go to 1 committee meeting a month. That's why we put that in there. That's the major thing that we have in there. We would be open to adding more stuff. I mean, like if you have any other ideas, like, please tell us. Like, other than that, we were just thinking, like, we need accountability from, like, senators to the point that, like, where if Norwalk is texting, if Norwalk is in a meeting where, like, nobody's there, like, we need, like, in Norwalk, Texas, senators saying, like, oh, I'm sorry, the look on Norwalk's face. But yeah, like, so if, like, I mean, like, if there's nobody in Norwalk's meeting, like, and he texts his senators and saying, like, I need you in the next meeting, like, we need accountability to where, like, senators are actually showing up to their main committee meetings. Like, that's the only way this is gonna work. And also on top of it, we also have ad hoc. So, like, that's why ad hoc is still there. Ad hoc, and that's why we have ad hoc, like, not allowed to, like, leave and go to different committees.
The other thing is there are already standards for kind of senator-VP relationships inside the bylaw that we've never really used. VPs are the people for senators. They're their primary resource as well as their primary evaluative source. Every semester the VP does need to conduct evaluations of everyone who is their primary, like the senator of their primary committee, whatever committee that VP runs. So there are some kind of long-term mechanisms in there to ensure that. And the way, again, how I see this working in the real world is that a lot of senators go to a lot of different VPs for different advice, different administrative recommendations, different inputs. Because no issue very few issues fall solely within one silo of a DSG committee. And I think understanding that and understanding the way that this could work, again, more organically, more naturally, having students be able to kind of do what they want with what they want, they're gonna have the VP who they're gonna trust the most and go to the most.
Yeah. So. Motion to, wait, somebody motion?
There's a motion on the floor to increase the speaker's time by 5 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Senator Torres, ask your question.
Okay, so just kind of a follow-up, would it be friendly to then amend it somehow so that, if there is something important that a committee needs to do, the vice president could designate that meeting as mandatory, and then the meeting resumes its regular mandatory committee status where everybody on the committee needs to be there?
Yeah, I think that we would have to work out the language, but something along the lines of emergency committee notification, either if it's resulting campus crisis or large ticket decisions, could have it so if it is something that requires a vote, that all senators must be present to vote. Something like that we can definitely add in.
The general concept.
Senator Smith?
Would it be friendly to have one mandatory meeting at the beginning of the month, this is what I plan on working on this month, these are the committees that I want to go to, and then one at the end, this is what I've done, this is what I've worked on, just so then you have two for sure meetings that people will be attending.
Yeah, I know something that we kind of talked about with some other people was changing the requirement from 1 meeting a month to either 2 a month or 6 per semester, which works out to 1 3/4 a month. And I think that's totally valid. I think kind of in terms of the specifics of how that might operate, introducing it as a provisional measure of kind of senators must, it's the legislative intent. Right now senators have to submit a statement of legislative intent within the first, they have to do something over the summer, and then they have to do something before fall break, or a week after appointment, be it at large or ad hoc. So I think we could use that and kind of specify what goes into those statements of legislative intent, and then measure progress based off of what's been happening with that, and then use that for the evaluation process. Does that make sense? And change to,
Any additional questions? Senators?
So this is sort of a question getting at what Norwalk was saying before, but what if you have 1 or maybe 0 elected senators? Currently, that would be fixed by at large, but in this restructuring, at large senators don't have a primary committee, right?
No, they do. They have a primary committee, yes.
Oh,
It
they
says
do?
that up
Okay.
there. They still have a primary committee / VP though.
Just to clarify, is this changing the number of senators?
No, this is flexible with any number.
Okay, so this is just how it would work within the current number that we have.
And I personally think our problems with efficiency, not necessarily size. So this is kind of a way to explore and see if that's actually the case.
And if we pass this and DSG does decide next year to change the size, it doesn't affect us.
And if it turns out it doesn't work, we're speaking on the board, but we really change the constitutional referendum until we pass election. Vice President Nash.
Yeah, so I just want to point out that I think this is actually a much bigger reform than what was proposed last week, so I think we should be wary of that. I also want to say that one of your points was okay, kind of trust us that we're going to keep attendance Alana's really good at organizational things, which like everyone knows is super true, but Alana, you're also not going to be EVP past next year, and it could be that we might have a less organized EVP or whoever in the future, right? So that could cause problems, right? Because this is like supposedly going to be like a long-term change. So if this doesn't indeed get voted down, or even prior to that, would you guys be open to making it so, kind of having an intermediary step, which would be making it so just at-large senators would have this kind of committee fluidity rather than the entire body of the Senate?
Yeah, so we talked about this. We thought that this was gonna kind of be like the intermediary step. We would have to think about that more, I think. Potentially could be friendly, but
do you think we can take a straw poll to see where senators lie on that question?
Yeah.
So if you think that we should make it so all senators have this committee fluidity, raise your hand now. Okay.
Wait, what was the question?
So if you like this over just at-large Senate fluidity.
Or if we do this versus nothing, then this versus at-large?
Sure. So
At-large versus
if you prefer this to nothing, raise your hand. Okay, and so if you prefer just making it at-large, so kind of decelerating the rate of Senate restructuring to nothing, raise your hand.
I like that actually.
Did everyone understand that? So like basically like we would only implement this for at-large senators.
At least for like a trial.
So it'd
one
be like the
year.
actual definition of like what an at-large senator should be. They don't have.
Yeah.
Should be in Senate units, right? There's nothing, might be a
Comparing just at large to this, because we just did just at large.
Yeah, so okay, so if you prefer just at-large committee fluidity. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so okay, if you prefer just at-large committee fluidity to all senator committee fluidity, raise your hands.
JP, this is at large versus
This is at large to entirety. Okay, and if you prefer entirety to at large.
Who favors entirety to the current the status quo?
These are a lot of straw polls. Okay, I see some wavering hands. Yeah.
Who would be fine with voting for this regardless if it's at large or entirety of the Senate? Raise your hand.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, so there were definitely, guys, there were more questions. Let's just take more questions, try to answer as many things as possible, address as many concerns. I think to address the big thing with like, yeah, we could definitely negotiate to at large as an intermediary step, but I'd like to vote on kind of all of it.
Can I just make one clarifying point? So making it so it would just be at large senators isn't necessarily an alternative to this, but kind of potentially a predecessor to this, right? So we do it for only at-large senators for a year, see how that works out. Like, what percentage of senators at-large? I don't know.
Half.
Half?
This one is more than half.
Yes, so something like that. So figure out how that works for a year, rather than kind of just jumping like all the way into this. I think makes a lot of sense.
Which is why we're like tentatively friendly to doing it at large, but like I think Alana and I would have to talk about it.
Yeah, and like maybe this
Also, we're not voting on this right now, in case
and
anybody.
to address the attendance issue that you brought up, again, like that's why we have to trust in our bylaws, where we have like instructions and like essentially expectations to track attendance, take attendance, and ensure proper attendance. That's the charge for every VP. That's like in the Constitution. That's in our Senate bylaw. And I think if we're not following that, like that's our own fault. That said, we're creating the DSG Google Drive archive, and that's like Annie's big project for the rest of the year. So we will have the materials in terms of the mechanisms that we're using to carry forward. So even if you have someone less like, like I love charts and spreadsheets, and like if somebody does love charts and spreadsheets as the EVP, they still can do that. The other thing is this would really fall under the domain of the Internal Affairs Committee as a whole, not necessarily just to a single person. And I think because you have a full committee structure, it kind of falls back to this point, where when you have a network of people, it's inherently going to have support that's more sustainable and kind of wider reaching. And that would be kind of have more tangible effect here.
Also, can I just make the point that, like, if we do this next year and Alana does a really good job of it, it sets an incredible precedent for, like, the next person. Like, I know JP made this point of, like, what if, like, we get an EVP, like, the year after who, like, isn't as organized or whatever. Like, this essentially sets a much higher precedent for how DSG has to operate. Like, we need to, we're essentially trying to raise the bar and, like, keep it steady like that. Like, I don't know. I just personally think that, like, that's the thought process you have to come into.
That said, vote for the plan, not
Not
how I
for
would do
a
the plan. Like, this is something that we want to last with, like, whether I were VP or not.
What would you think of doing something like there are some designated seats for election and at large that are designated like fluid seats? So like I don't know what you would call it, but not like almost like a new committee kind of position, but not a committee, just like general senators, general body senators, or something like that, where if you want to work on different committees, you can run for that and apply a election for that.
Yeah, so that kind of ties into what we think is a very issue with elections, and that like, my ideal for this would be like, everybody just runs for Senate, and then internally we figure out what to do like for real government, but the feasibility of having like 50 people run on a ballot is just like not there, which is why you're still kind of gonna run for primary committee. So that's why I'd be opposed to having just like running for Senate as a whole. That said,
What I'm saying is that you still have the 7 committees.
but you have a separate voting pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think you would have a lot of people run for that voting pool, and you wouldn't really have a specific platform, and you wouldn't really be able to have that be an effective voting mechanism. That would be, I think, if you want to have general senators, that's what an at-large senator would be in that capacity.
Michael, I think it's not, I don't think it's like a straight straw poll thing or interesting. I think we just need like more of like a actual like what would that look like.
And to me, that sounds like what at-large could be if we were to kind of, if this is the extreme, kind of go to a more moderate of only at-large senators operating in this capacity. Christina?
Do you think this would disincentivize some senators from running because they want like a more fluid position, like they want that like yeah.
So
that's what I was
if it was at large out. Like,
yeah, so I actually think that if it were at large, it would kind of go, I guess I have a couple of ways that this could possibly go. I actually think it would disincentivize people from running at all. If they know that if they run, then they're kind of going to be locked in, and if they don't run, then they're going to have the opportunity to kind of shake it up and either find something they're really passionate about after a couple weeks of searching, or stick with something but get input from other committees and be allowed to work on that. I also think that people who run at large do tend to be more project oriented a lot of times, and kind of have like very specific concrete proposals and ideas, and that's because like on the at-large application we ask like, do you have a concrete specific idea, how would you carry it out? So I think that this model would work really well for at-large senators purely because of that reason, and because of that I think it would make people not run. Is that answer? I think it is.
Wait, but what prevents an elected senator from pursuing something in a different committee?
Like in status quo?
Personally,
Nothing does, but
I want active affairs.
But you're also a 30-year senator who has had a lot of exposure to different committees.
Well, like if you, it clearly is a cultural thing, not just a structural thing. So if you inform the entire Senate, you're saying you are allowed to do this, and what is stopping that?
Because then we still have these operations in place where you'd be expected to go to academic affairs every week, even if you're not working on something that's like academic affairs, or you don't care about the other projects going on in academic affairs. So you're still kind of bound to working on a single issue area, even when projects or multiple projects you're working on would better fall under different categories. On top of that, I think that like we are really limited within jurisdiction. You are a senator for academic affairs, not just a senator. In this model, you're like a senator's primary appointments with academic affairs. I think it does allow for flexibility more so than our model does now, because like as much as, like when I was a senator, like if I really, really wanted to work on like a random facilities project, I would not have like felt like it were comfortable for me to go into facilities and just like hang out and pitch a project. Because it's just like not something that you do. And when I emailed like professors or like emailed administrators, it's like, hi, I'm a senator, and they'd ask me, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, well, technically I'm in equity. And I think that kind of uses that barrier, even if it is a perceived barrier, it's definitely one that exists. Like we don't have cross-committee collaboration, we don't have people showing up to other people's committees regularly. And I think even if that is a culture shift, this codifies a culture shift.
yeah, I'm trying to normalize it.
It's also really fun because it's like a very few word difference. It's like read the bylaw changes.
Couldn't we come up with a way to better inform senators of their ability to work across committees without having to like restructure? Just because I feel like this this plan offers a lot of loopholes for, like, as Tara said earlier, or non-committed senators to get away with not getting much done.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and address like the not getting stuff done and like non-committed senator thing first, because I really think that that's kind of a moot point. And then I'm gonna go back to like why can't we just do it in our current model. So in terms of the non-committed senator issue, like I said, I think that this inherently gives senators more agency over the work that they're doing with DSG and the different projects that they have, and that's gonna make people committed. You're always gonna have people in the room who like aren't that talkative, and that's fine. I don't think that person is gonna show up to another committee to just do the same thing in that committee room. Unless they just want to learn, in which case, what's the harm? Maybe next year they'll be really outstanding. In terms of like somebody who might like actively shirk their responsibilities, that's why you still have a primary committee appointment, and that's why you have evaluations and legislative intent statements. There's really enough like evaluative things going on through the semester already in the bylaw that it's like every month there's a checkup essentially, like a month into school, fall break, end of the semester. That said, I don't think that we could just kind of inform people like, hey, you can work across committees, because you still have to show up to your own committee meeting every week. And you still, again, like have that barrier to like, I am not a senator for XYZ, I'm stuck in ABC. And even if like you personally might be willing to kind of go to different committees or kind of explore different areas and work on those projects more substantially, that's something that is so like radical in our current model that it's just like underutilized and not utilized.
Do you think there could be like, if this doesn't pass, do you think there's maybe another version of this that's just slightly less, I mean, I want to say less extreme. I'm not saying this is extreme, but just like more low key, just as a like trial version.
So that's the trial one would be the at-large.
Yeah, so
if you have another idea for like a trial one, like definitely think about it and talk to us about it before the next week's meeting.
Say personally, my hesitancy with just doing it with a trial at large is that then you have two competing systems of project management and tracking, which is just going to create even more problems than if we were to make a complete shift. Also, based off of like the numbers of people who are running this year, we're still going to pick half of our Senate at large. So like numerically, we're still going to have a lot of people in that fluid model. You might have people choose not to run because they know that they wouldn't be able to be fluid if they run at large.
Anyone else?
JP?
So, wait, I kind of want to re-ask that question and ask you to re-articulate why you think this intermediary step, or like kind of slowing the transition towards the restructuring via an at-large model, is worse than jumping straight to all senators having full committee positions?
So I don't know if it's worse, I just think it's different and like has both pros and cons. Pro being like it is a trial period and you can really assess halfway through the year like, okay, just kidding, pick your primary committee, we'll deal with size issues as they come up. And I think like kind of understanding that that is a really like positive thing that we could try it out, we could shift, is important. But I do think that having a model that's like flexible and will allow people to do more and be truly at large is going to incentivize people to try for at large. Particularly if they have already been a senator on one committee and are trying to run for re-election for another committee, and if they know they're going to be locked into another committee when they might want to kind of go back to the original one, that could kind of cause issues. Same thing for first years. I think this would be most beneficial for first year senators who might not really, like might run for something because it sounds cool, get to committee, be like, oh, actually, like I kind of like this, but I'm still learning, but I think I'm actually really interested in like this totally other issue area. And in that case, having it so like those are the people who are locked in, I think is like even worse.
So what if we just made a provisional model whereby first year senators have a greater degree of flexibility because of that one?
But like, do you think that first year senators would be the ones who would be like willing to go to different committees and stuff? Like, if anything, first year senators are the ones who are like least likely to go because they have the least institutional knowledge, like least least knowledge about how DSG operates and like who.
But you're contradicting what Alana just said.
Yeah,
right?
we haven't talked about the first year.
We have,
like,
yeah,
that's
I don't necessarily know if I agree with Alana on all this.
Like that'd be very separate.
Yeah, I think we would. I don't know. We have to talk about that, but.
And then just going to administratively, how I think having two systems could be really, really tough, is that one, we would have to have like two very separate attendance mechanisms, one for people who are fluid and one for people who are kind of like standard or traditional senators.
But you also said a few minutes ago that we should vote for the plan, not for like the organizational like necessities that would go along with it, right? But now you're saying, oh.
I said vote for the plan, not vote for me.
But now you're saying, oh, this alternative might be organizationally too cumbersome for vice presidents or the EVP to maintain.
Well, it's
right?
not.
So you can't simultaneously maintain that this is like fine, we're just voting on the text, and then also say, oh, but this alternative is too organizationally difficult.
Okay, so can I rephrase what I said before, which is not vote for me, not vote for the plan? I'm very confident that if we were to find an organizational mechanism that would work, that we could honestly put the damn chart in the bylaw and hope that somebody uses it the next year. Keep that archive alive so people do use the mechanism. We've used the same mechanism year to year to year with different EVPs, different internal affairs, different pro temps. So I think the mechanisms are what are going to be long lasting. It's the person who might not be. That said, I think it's much easier strategically to have one model of tracking project management attendance than two models operating coincidentally. Obviously, like either way this goes, like I personally would be happy to iron out the kinks in both models and be like, okay, this one's better, this one's worse. Here's how we're gonna combine that. But again, like vote for the plan, not me. Like in terms of like administrative burden, I think it is more so that like people who would be at large hopping around, like there'd just be more of them. I think that people would be elected. I think people who would be elected to those spots are going to be first years who might find out that like they would be the ones better suited towards being this like flexible center model.
The speaker's time has elapsed.
Motion to extend by 3 minutes.
Alright. Is there a second? There's a motion on the floor to extend the speaker's time by 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
3 minutes, yeah.
Can I ask a question and get a straw poll?
Go ahead.
Speak. So one interesting thing, or not in this plan, is under the current model, there is no express prohibition endorsement of all senators moving between committees. If we expressly said, at-large senators, you can do X, and then didn't say, elected senators, you also can do X, would that change the culture that is supposed to be making these two seats?
Okay, I'm kind of confused by your question, but I think I agree with you.
No, I kind of agree with you. I mean, to be honest, like I think that that's like, I agree with you. Like in theory, I think that like institutionally we are saying, I guess we're saying that, but like in theory, like everyone would still be able to do like the same things. Like theoretically, like an elected senator can still do stuff in committee, but I think like I think we need to talk about this at large.
I personally would not, I don't want to work with it. I think an at-large contingency plan would be better than nothing, but I think that it would definitely like privilege at-large senators in a way that would be like ultimately harmful, because I do think you're like benefiting them or harming them, depending on like what you think about a flexible structure in general.
And then straw poll based on that, can elected senators in like currently here raise their hands real quick? It's like the count. Elected senators, yeah. All right, of all of you guys, how many of you might rather be at large if at-large senators have the ability to move between committees compared to elected? Yeah. Just put your hand down if you'd rather have the ability to move around. All right. So
I really liked how we told them to put it down.
Yes.
That's a lot of dramatic.
Elected senators, raise your hand. If, as elected senators, you want the ability to move around, keep your hand in the air. Awesome.
Wait, what was your point?
Made it so that large could move around and nobody would run everybody.
So yeah, I want to rephrase the question that someone asked earlier. That was, I think that this is possible in the status quo. Right? Like, I don't think that we need to like fundamentally restructure our committee system in order to make it so somebody on the services committee can work on a project that like might fall under the theoretical definition of equity analysis, right? So like I think that the cons of like what this would do to productivity and accountability are like much greater in magnitude and like much more solvable, because like I know that there are senators. Yeah. So do you think it's possible in the status quo for a senator on one committee who really wants to work on a project that might be defined under another committee's purview to do so?
If that senator's willing to give up more hours of their day and more hours of their week to go to two different committees and be responsible, they're also not technically beholden to the other VP at all, whereas under this mechanism can be transferred or dually delegated.
I think it's also if they're comfortable in the structure of like the fact that like that's not a normal thing that like a lot of senators do, like particularly like freshman senators. I think like that's like one of the things we're trying to address. We're trying to address like we want to make that like the norm. We want to make it the norm where like senators are able to like work in between like committees. So, like obviously yes, like that can happen now, but like the probability that it's going to happen now versus the probability that it would happen under this is like two very different.
And maybe just to kind of inform some things that I think kind of background reasons why this is a good plan. We all remember the Senate Diversity Survey, and people who participate in Senate and DSG as a whole are wealthier, are whiter, are affiliated, generally have more of a privilege to be able to partake in DSG in this capacity. Having a more flexible model to whatever degree, whether that is that you can go to different committees or work on different projects, only go to one every couple of weeks, figure out when a schedule works for you, does mitigate a lot of those problems as well that are inherent to our current structure, where you're kind of beholden to go. And if you did want to go above and beyond the DSG and give up even like those hours, like for some people, 2 hours in an evening is really big, and to give that up twice or 3 times is like even worse. And like that is 100% the case for people in this room. And like obviously that's a niche reason, but that's a big thing that informs like diversity in the Senate reflecting in kind of flexibility in the system. Another thing that I think really informs like the reason for flexibility are these like dynamic needs on campus and the fact that we need bigger issues. So yeah, a senator might want to take on like a personal project in multiple committees, but are you not going to have like a network of senators? I think if we want to actually have like sustainable change, it needs to be dialogue based, discussion based, large scale like projects that are being worked on by multiple people. And I don't think that our current structure is correctly towards that like at all, unless it's within a committee.
Point of information, will this require a simple majority or a simple majority to pass?
2/3.
2/3?
Okay. Thank you.
So, and we'll do like office hours again during the week too. Yeah.
Wait, are we voting on this next week?
Yeah, the first reading.
It's just the hot days that it's like you should have it.
Good, all right.
It should say, yep, that's it. Are you doing it now?
Yep.
Okay. So a couple of weeks ago, this was brought up and we tabled it because we didn't want to do 2 major changes at the same time. So if you remember when we voted to put on the constitutional ballot to internalize the SOC chair position, this was the other half of that, which was to make pro temp elected in the spring and not the fall. So basically what this would do would allow any eligible person, so that's somebody who has served on Senate before and will be serving on Senate again next year, to be elected as pro temp. And that election would take place essentially like the last meeting of the year, so they'd be able to be on the exec board through the summer and not in the fall.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
This is the second reading, so it's not.
I mean, like technically speaking, it is because we tabled it. So
Wait, Ilana, we did?
This is a second.
reread it. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, the language before was like the president or board will be elected by the Senate, like the year in which that person is a member, or like the Senate session in which that person is a member. And this says that if you have been a member of DSG, whether it was 2 years ago or last year or currently, you are eligible to be pro temp, and we will elect you in the spring to serve starting in the fall. Yeah. So this is basically like the Hopkins, like both Hopkins and Jay could have still run. It just would have been a lot like in April last year, meaning that like freshmen wouldn't be able to vote, but it would be this group next year's program.
Any further questions?
Are there any at-large Senate seats at the end of this year, or they're all in the fall?
So at-large seats will be in the fall. So that is something to consider for voting on this. Yeah, but if you also keep in mind, we choose the president pro temp before we do fall at-large, because we need the pro temp like basically.
Would it be possible to maybe add that we do the at-large for upperclassmen in the spring, so that those people are voting on people pro temp?
Yeah. Yeah, so we take a lot of first years at large. So yeah, just ask
Any additional questions?
Kind of add, I guess, a little bit to Senator Hardy's point. would it be possible to just do the 2 at large for, never mind.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, basically this moves it up by a single meeting from the first meeting of next year to the last meeting of this year, which like otherwise would be, Hopkins is raising his hand.
Yeah, so I'll question,
Did you know?
yeah, I forgot what it was.
It would have been
Oh,
very
yeah.
valuable
Doesn't
if
this-
this exact
doesn't
board
this-
had keyed it on.
Yeah, doesn't this not change the eligibility of the person running for pro temp, or the pool of people that could potentially run for pro temp?
Does not change, it codifies that if you've been on Senate, then you're eligible.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, seeing none, we're now on objective. Is this a question or?
Yeah, it's a question, and it's kind of an improbable scenario, but certainly one that's possible. So say,
If there's no,
what?
oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, so say I've served on Senate before,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not serving in the current year, but plan to be on Senate next
You're
year.
still eligible.
But I won't be in Senate for the election, presumably.
So-
right?
So,
Do you want it, because you,
yeah, so we already passed the bylaw change that codified that question.
Yeah.
This is a constitutional change, which is more broad, so like it doesn't need to address that specific case. But basically, they would be, everyone that was elected that doesn't currently sit on Senate would receive an email saying like, we are voting on pro temp this week. If you'd like to run or participate in the election, come to the meeting. They would have had to have won an election like 3 weeks previously, so there's not a scenario where like they could be off campus for the semester and not capable of attending.
But they couldn't become at large the next year.
Right, because this is still.
Okay, I mean, I guess it's not
like
reasonable.
Jay still would have been eligible if you remember this year's election.
Right. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't really come up.
Yeah, and then like if somewhere abroad, like these guys come in or whatever.
Okay.
But they couldn't be abroad because then they couldn't have won that election in the first place.
Okay, seeing none, we're now in line with protecting the negative speech against the Senate bylaw revisions. Would anyone like
Point
to
of order.
introduce it? Yes, Senator Curtis.
So, I don't know if we do protect the negatives on a first reading, but I think this should be the first reading
This
because.
is the second reading.
Okay, so let me clarify.
It should be the first reading.
Yeah.
We tabled it. That was the first.
No, we did, remember we did the
first
whole
reading was used for the
switcheroo.
second reading of the SOFC amendment, which passed, so it's a new thing. So this should be a first reading.
In which case, sure. This is only the first reading. There will not be any opposition speeches. Thank you, Senator Curtis. Moving on next to another EVP. A resolution calling for disciplinary action against Executive Vice President Tallman Trask. Senator David Blake, please consider the floor.
Am I, or are you?
I thought we were almost done.
Oh,
Night is just beginning.
Not even close.
We still don't have all the evidence, right?
Yeah, so this is totally premature. This is entirely dependent on the article being entirely accurate. Okay. So is there a first and second reading for a resolution? That's like voting on the resolution? Is there a protected negative? Okay.
Vice President Johnson, please take the chair.
Just so I have a concrete example to use, but the Chronicles were wrong. Huh? Just so I have a concrete example to use. In the lacrosse game of 2006, the Chronicles said, I know that there was, in 2006,
We are all familiar with the standard. I feel that Dr. Trask has not conducted himself honorably in all of his endeavors, therefore I am acting, and I feel that DSG should in turn act. So, when one feels that the community standard has been violated, the Duke Community Standard in practice suggests bringing attention to the behavior and calling attention to university staff so that it may be addressed uniformly or to the appropriate level. That is the aim of this resolution. Side note about the Duke University community standard in practice, it makes a lot of language that's specifically referring to students, but it is in effect describing how the Duke Community Standard, which all Duke community members are bound, are to behave. So in the resolution, I additionally argue that the text in the Duke Community Standard in practice should be changed to reflect the accountability of all members of the Duke community, not just students, to behave themselves and conduct themselves with regards to it. So, we make reference to Dr. Trask quoting himself things that he's conceded.
with respect to certain aspects of the standards practice. First off, disorderly conduct, defined as any unreasonable or reckless conduct by an individual or group that is inherently preventing the safety of other persons, or any behavior that disrupts the peace, interferes with the normal operation of the university or university-sponsored activities, such as reckless driving or interrupting or interfering with the carrying out of the duties of a university or public official. With respect to that, and Dr. Trask's quotes, the resolution states that Dr. Trask exhibited disorderly conduct by driving as close as he did to Ms. Underwood while, quote, extremely frustrated, and by interfering with the carrying out of the duties of the university official by making angry remarks due to having, quote, lost his patience. The community standard also defines failure to comply as failure to comply with directions, requests, or orders from any university representative or body acting in an official capacity, or impeding with the carrying out of such directives. With respect to that in Dr. Trask's statement, the resolution states that Dr. Trask exhibited a failure to comply with a university official by responding with rude comments rather than interacting with Ms. Underwood in a straightforward manner. The section on sanctions mentions that the extent of sanction that is issued to an individual should have bearing on the acceptance of responsibility of that individual. Now, we have Dr. Trask's apology here. I don't know how you feel, but I suspect that if one of us were to bring this in as our apology for something in front of student conduct, I'm not convinced that they would think that that is a sincere acceptance of responsibility, and the resolution reflects that reflects that. So, one complaint or criticism I've heard of this resolution is that it's logistically infeasible. It's hard for administration to do this, like you're asking for something that can't be done. So I went through and conveniently listed all these different sanction options that would be available to the administration were they to decide to react in some way to the behavior that Trask has done. However, like so, maybe removing him or whatever is infeasible, sure, or maybe it's not even, maybe it could be determined to not even be an appropriate punishment, fine, but certainly one or even a number of these are very logistically possible and reasonable for the university to be done. Additionally, another major complaint I have heard is that due to the presence of a criminal case, this isn't something that we should look into, no, whatever. However, I would like to refer to, again, the Duke Community Standard and Practice, which states explicitly that individuals may be accountable to both civil authorities and to the university for acts that violate local, state, or federal laws. Disciplinary action through university processes concurrent with criminal action does not subject a student to double jeopardy. Therefore, with respect to that, I think the fact that a criminal case is currently pending has no bearing on whether or not we should decide to support an administrative disciplinary response to Dr. Trask's behaviors. Additionally, the Duke Community Standard and Practice mentions the process of investigation can occur for things such as this to bring clarity to the situation. One particular area where I think it would be quite easy through investigation, through proper investigation, determine the extent of the sanction that could occur would be determining whether or not Dr. Trask drove away before being apprehended by the police or not, because it is also a violation of university policy to violate local ordinances or state or federal laws as determined through the university's disciplinary process. And according to the North Carolina State Legislature, driving away from a car accident like this is an offense. Ultimately, all I'm asking is that we hold Dr. Trask accountable to the same standards that we would hold any other member of the Duke community with regards to his actions. That's all.
You're left with 5 minutes of questions.
Yeah.
Please keep these civil.
Right.
Have you talked with Dr. Trask?
I have not.
Have you talked with Bernard?
To?
The general counsel of the university.
I'm sorry?
The general counsel of the university?
I have not.
Have you talked with his lawyer?
I have not.
Have you talked with Dean Bryant?
I would ask what relevance you think these questions has to the facts that I just presented.
That these are all relevant people that we're trying to hear both sides of the case. We should.
But I presented my case based on Dr. Trask's own statement.
So one of the things you also missed, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I just don't feel like the Senate is really the place to go through all of the different legal implications and say whether or not he has committed a violation worthy of, like, punishment in this fashion. Like, I don't, the investigation hasn't even completed on any level other than the chronicle.
Is this a question?
So, yeah, so like, why do you think the Senate has the authority or like the knowledge to really make a judgment?
Sure, so I think that's a great question. One, I think it's appropriate to investigate this because it's explicitly stated in the Duke University Standard and Practice that that's not relevant, although I don't think it's our place to investigate. However, it is our place as Duke University, as members of the Duke community and as senators to act when the standard is compromised. I feel that it has been, and if you feel that way as well, I would urge you to vote for this legislation. That's all.
Given that there's currently a lawsuit against Tallman Trask, I think that maybe they're already going through the formal channels.
Well, I certainly going through the formal legal channels. However, I have not been given any indication that any sort of administrational response is occurring with regards to Trask. So, yeah.
Do you think it's not relevant then to wait until after the formal channel is on the legal?
The formal channel could take years, and again, it explicitly states that there's nothing wrong with investigating something despite the existence of such a proceeding. Yes.
And let's stick to one question at a time because a lot of you have your hands up.
Do you think that it might be more relevant to have a resolution against PTS in general as opposed to Tallman Trask in particular, because that's just one specific event that's very hard to document and verify, and even though it may very well be true, like everything that did happen that they accused him of, but it would have wouldn't it have a more powerful impact if we went and passed a resolution about this, but like in relation to PTS?
Sure. So I would hugely support and be willing to co-author such a resolution. The only reason that I didn't co-author one myself is that I felt that I was able to articulate my points for this, and I didn't feel that I alone could successfully do something like that, and I was unable to find a co-author. I think that that is absolutely something that I support as well. Although, again, I also, of course, support this since I'm proposing it.
Other questions?
Yeah.
So calling for disciplinary action before like the investigation is concluded and whatnot, isn't that sort of similar to like the lacrosse scandal incident?
Well, the things I'm calling for disciplinary action regarding are specifically things that Dr. Trask himself has stated that he has done. Now, of course, if an action were to actually occur, an investigation would of course be appropriate, and if it were deemed that these statements do not imply disorderly conduct or failure to comply, then there ought to be no action, of course. However, I would argue that on grounds of what Dr. Trask himself has conceded, it is clear that he has made these violations, and therefore, I think at the very least making a statement as to the government, the effect that this should be looked into is important. Yeah.
So, you say that this should be looked into. Is it not true that this resolution, would you be in favor of making the resolution instead say that there should be an administrative inquiry rather than that he should be punished?
Well, I feel that it is clear from his own statement that he has administered disorderly conduct and failure to comply, and therefore that's what the resolution is about, in addition to calling for further investigation on the things that we don't know. But with regards to the things that we do know, that is
We have time for like some more questions, then we'll do
In the second class, be it further resolved statement, the resolution does say that an investigation should take place and the disciplinary actions we take should be in accord with the results of that investigation. Do you think, given a sense that all these questions about whether or not we should wait until after the investigation should be answered more or less by this final or second class involvement?
That investigation does not refer to a criminal investigation. It refers to an administrational response to the incident, which as of yet has not occurred. Of course, if the investigation were to find that no disciplinary action should be taken, then that would be appropriate. However, I felt that it was clear that from Trask's own quote, certainly some amount of disciplinary action ought to be taken, and that that's something that I was willing to stand by.
Okay, are there questions on the floor for more time for questions?
Yes.
So, insofar,
Motion to extend. Yeah, we'll do 5 more questions instead of time, and then just try to keep it brief.
so insofar as this resolution is somewhat implying that there, or more explicitly also saying that there should be punishment, just what kind maybe should be up to investigation. Like, are you at all concerned that the legislative body of DSG is taking on a judicial role?
Well, I think we are saying that there should be an action taken. I think that we have to understand that this is a resolution. We're just saying what we think should happen, and that it's not incredibly different for me to say that I think that the standard has been compromised, and therefore it should be investigated, and it should be called, and it should be dealt with. And I would argue this is just the organizational version of saying, hey, something is going on, we would like to report what we perceive to be a violation. Of course, there's always the chance of that violation not being found to have occurred. However, yeah.
Do you believe that So if this resolution were to pass now and later on throughout the investigation, new evidence comes up that sees that, like, that tells us that he violated the due community standard further than what we believe him to have now,
Yes.
like, we would have to pass another resolution for further action? Or like, do you think considering that possibility, it might be premature to try and pass this resolution now before all the facts of the investigation have been released?
The facts of the criminal investigation will likely not be released for years, and no university investigation is occurring. Additionally, I would hope that the university, upon finding additional evidence, would take into account the fact that we mentioned in this that the investigation's results should be factored into the sanctions. So I would argue that this already asks for that.
So,
yes.
So regarding the first be it resolved clause,
The first what?
the first like clause calling for something in the
yeah.
resolution, right?
No.
Yeah, be resolved by the Senate additional, just go down and
Just scroll.
yeah, just scroll down. Yep, there it is. So where it says like, you know, with respect to his role as a university, he should face administrational repercussions. Should we add, do you think it would be, you know, prudent to add if he is, I don't know, found guilty, convicted, whatever you want, something?
Sure. If investigation yields, like, yeah.
I can't edit this.
No. Oh, no.
You can make a copy and edit that.
Sorry.
File.
Should we maybe pass a resolution then to call
So internal university investigation of accountability.
The circuit's role, maybe resolution, outlining this resolution. Maybe we can move it after the first, yeah, okay.
So that if found guilty within a university investigation.
Sure. That if found guilty by an administrational attempt to respond to his behavior or something like that. That's not good. If found guilty by a university investigation. There you go. Any more questions? But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a dumb question or not, but is this call for an investigation, a sanction, or both?
This is calling for a sanction. One, it's calling for an investigation. Two, it's calling for a sanction in the event that an investigation finds that he has been in violation of the university requirements. Yes.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Laura?
Yes.
Do you think this is pretty on the lead up to election?
Oh, what do you mean? Like, for like?
That we are going into elections and this year, that is very, it would be in the best interest of DSG to wait until after an election season.
Well, I would like to believe that like expressing our views on important issues is more important than attempting to play politics.
Okay, we've expired time for questions. Are there any more questions on the floor? Do I need to roll in more time? Okay, seeing none, we're in line for protected negative speech. So please, you can go ahead and sit down. Sir? Okay, all those wishing to speak against this resolution, please raise your hands. Okay, PMC Borgo, you have the floor.
So I think that there are several issues wrong with this piece of legislation. First and foremost, when we come to think about the national precedence of actually removing a member of a school's administration, I think that the closest example that comes to mind is what happened at the University of Missouri this past semester in the fall, where University President Timothy Wolf and the Chancellor Arvo Lofton were both ousted and resigned from their post at the University of Missouri after a slew of incidents that ultimately led to their resignation in the first place. That immediately prior to their resignation, their student government at the University of Missouri issued a call for them to resign and issued a call for disciplinary action taken against them. I think if we are going to make a call for disciplinary action against Tallman Trask III, then we should at the very least wait until there's further evidence from the investigation to be released so that we are in a position of clarity as to whether or not he does indeed deserve to be punished in the first place. Secondly, from a pragmatic viewpoint, I don't think this is a very good course of action because we have to consider that he is someone who is integral to the functionality of our student government and our student body. While the majority of us may not work with him directly, there are still vice presidents in DSG who are appointed to the Board of Trustees who work with him on several different groups, including the Facilities and Environment Committee of the Board of Trustees, and the Business and Finance Committee of the Board of Trustees, where Alana Weisenhorst. I think that if we would a majority vote in the Senate to pass this resolution, then we put ourselves in a poor position to work with him next year as President-elect Charo Gonzalez, the Executive Vice President Ilana Wiseman, as well as every other VP will be elected in April, will undergo more than likely unfavorable conditions to work with this particular member of administration, who's second President Broadhead, on issues ranging from campus architecture to financial planning and the budgetary issues of our school as a whole. So ultimately, I don't think this is a right path forward, and I urge you all to vote against it. And I yield my time to questions.
Are there any questions on the floor? Okay, yeah, Jackson.
So, I agree with a lot of what you said to the extent that this resolution can be interpreted as a call for immediate reprisal or resignation of Dr. Trask. And I agree with Vita that perhaps the wording of this resolution is a little bit confusing. But is there anything wrong with the philosophical concept that if an investigation is conducted and by the administration, and that investigation finds wrongdoing on Dr. Trask's part, he should be punished?
Right, that's fine.
That is,
and that's exactly what the University of Missouri's student government did. They waited until there was enough public support from the administration themselves and faculty members there, and the students too, in order to actually call for resignation of Timothy Wolf and Bound Loft. And not only that, we consider the litany of incidences and events that led to the resignation of the members of the administration of the University of Missouri, including a hunger strike by a strike by the football team not play, a hunger strike by a student who the administration severely worried would die, a swastika made of feces posted to incite racial tensions at their school. They had a whole slew of events that their chancellor and president decided to ignore, and at one point their president was even lambasted by protesters in his car, where he chose to smile and laugh at the people who were protesting against it. I don't think that we are at this point here in Duke University where we can make a conscious and collective decision to oust or call for the ousting or disciplinary action against Trask until we reach that level of absurdity.
so convicted, yes, nothing about the ousting, but instead of Rose's reputation, and once again, though this wording may not necessarily present this point most clearly, I don't think what we necessarily are trying to do here is say, let's oust the person. It seems to me like what we're trying to do is say, this issue is important and should be given the proper credit. It's due credit, right? An investigation by the administration should take place. If this was slightly maybe reworded so that the investigation part of it and punishment pursuant to that investigation was more clearly represented, would there be any real problem?
Can you just repeat that last point?
So the essential question is there any problem with going for an investigation and punishment pursuant to?
No, and there's already a criminal investigation underway.
Administrative investigation and punishment for the administration.
He is already having charges pressed against him, so it's on both fronts. And the way I perceive this issue is the same way, and try not to laugh, but the relationship that the United States has with China, whereas they have human rights abuses, they may have done something wrong, but we're not going to call them out against it. We're not going to call for immediate terrible action against them on a military basis. But instead, we'll call for continue working with them, continue our relationship with them, until they reach the point where something disastrous happens under their watch and because of their own personal responsibility. Then that's the point where we should take action in the same way other schools have in the United States.
I can hear side chatter. Please break to one another or keep it softer. Senator Curtis?
Yeah, so, looking at the preambulatory clauses, which all kind of pretty explicitly declare that Dr. Tallman Trask has violated a couple parts of the community standard. Do you think that this resolution is really ultimately geared towards calling for an investigation, or if it's actually just trying to pass judgment on the issue?
Well, disciplinary action is only garnered through an investigation. And can you just repeat that last point again?
Do you think this resolution is honestly calling for an investigation and nothing more, or do you think it's more trying to kind of implicitly pass strong judgment?
I feel like it's definitely implicitly trying to pass judgment. Where was the resolution when the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary on the cross came out? Why didn't anyone issue a resolution against President Biden for that? Why didn't anyone issue a resolution against President Biden calling for disciplinary action last semester when so many different identity groups issued against him that they felt were addressed in the proper course of action? Which, by the way, is one of the main primary reasons that the student government at the University of Missouri decided to pursue action against their president and chancellor. Any further questions?
I move to call the question. I would like,
Sorry?
I hope there could be a positive speech, because I would like to add that negative speech, and I don't feel like there's been adequate discussion.
Thank you for that. Because there was no second motion to call question, so I'm going to roll into the other positive speech. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this resolution? Jay?
Ryan wants to have some more than one. So my positive, not necessarily in specific to this resolution, so much as I do think it's something that we should potentially begin to address, not necessarily the Trask incident specifically itself, because I think we should wait. I think if history has shown itself, it's probably a good idea to wait until the justice system has had its due. I don't know. That's fine. We're not like in like a drum circle. But seriously, I think that there's been some really interesting stuff happening. The students and faculty working together, talking about workers' rights at the university. And specifically, I think the second story, which has gotten overshadowed by this specific incident, that's been overshadowed by this specific incident's coverage, is actually something that we should probably be taking a lot more seriously, and something we should be thinking about much more deeply. Specifically, thinking about the workers' rights and amount of care that we show to different service people that work at the university on all different levels. And I think that's something that we should actually be putting a lot more focus on. And that's more what I'm coming up with. I don't think this is the right way to approach the Trask incident. Specifically, I think we should wait if you want to make a statement as declarative as this, but I do think we should have some form of resolution and some form of public discussion about what we believe should be happening in making Duke a better and more equitable place for every single community member that's a part of it, not just students, but the people who work here as well and that the university employs. So that's my main point that I just want to spend a minute. That's where I'm talking to.
Okay.
Questions? Do I have any questions?
We yield your most questions, but for it's not a technical speech, so you can make for questions if there are none. We have a minute to answer.
Okay, yeah, I'll take questions.
I'm just confused as to what we're waiting for. If is there an investigation by the administration as of now, or
So
are we waiting for that?
there's an active lawsuit, from my understanding, that Ms. Underwood has filed against Trask. That I think was filed only like a couple weeks ago. No? Fact checker?
I don't.
You don't remember?
Not
Okay,
going to comment.
that's fine. I assume you probably. So there's an active lawsuit. I don't know if there's actually an administrative. I don't think there's any form of administrative inquiry happening. That's something that maybe we can call for. I just don't think that. I don't think calling for. In this case, I don't think calling for like someone's resignation is the best process. I think you want to make sure that the university has actually done its due diligence, and the story more went after the fact that the university appeared to not do its due diligence in responding to Ms. Underwood's initial complaint after the initial incident. And that might be something that we would potentially support more.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, we're in line for another negative speech. Brian.
So I just want to say that discussions on socioeconomic divide, discussions on race, discussions on privilege, they're really important to have on a college campus, and we're really lucky to go to a school like Duke where we can have these discussions and we can move forward and we can learn things. I come to think about a story that is from John Adams, who was, I know, I should have been a history major. So he is the son of liberty, right? And there's the Boston Massacre that happens, and there's redcoats, and they kill a number of people, and the whole community is outraged against them, and they want to have a kangaroo court against them, condemning them, and no one will represent them, nobody. And the only person that will step up is John Adams. And why he does that is because he realized that that institutions, governments have to show restraint, have to show that they're going to wait for justice to happen, that they need to be fair with everyone. Justice takes time. We have to wait, we have to be patient. When we rush to judgment, we make mistakes, and I can't imagine being this person. You know, as much as we have to show empathy for Miss Underwood, for the workers at Duke, we really do. You know, I feel like we don't enough here, but we also have to show empathy for, you know, someone that's given 18 years of his life and worked as hard as he could for Duke. And we have to put ourselves in his shoes and ask ourselves, if we were him, would we want the Duke student government, which is supposed to be the voice of the students, to show restraint in this moment and wait for justice to show what's happened, or just demand his demise? There are ways that you can say, I want a review. You can go on this website called JAMS and say, I want it to happen. I think that there should be an investigation. But that's not what the role of DSG should be in this scenario, I think.
Another question.
Alright, you expired your time, so you don't have time for questions. Alright, I'll take a positive speaker. Okay, if there's nobody wishing to speak, we're gonna move to a vote.
Second.
Okay, so there's no one wishing to speak, so we're gonna go ahead and move into a roll call vote. All those in favor of moving to a vote, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, there was a motion for a roll call vote that I'm gonna roll in now. So, keep in mind you can, say aye, nay, or you can abstain from this. Keep it through. And, Marco's gonna have my vote agree.
Senator Wales? Nay. Senator Brown? Nay. Senator Gilbert?
Nay.
Senator Gottlieb? Senator Jane? Nay. Senator Moneta? Nay. Sorry, was it? Nay. Senator Sullivan?
Abstain.
Senator Katzen?
Nay.
Senator Shaw? Nay. Senator Glasser?
Nay.
Senator Letourneau? Nay. Senator Hardy?
Abstain.
Senator Smith? Abstain. Senator Kadakia?
Nay.
Senator Harrington? Nay. Senator Key?
Nay.
Senator Dellinger?
Aye.
Senator Nango-Passi?
Abstain.
Senator Lynch? Senator Chang?
Aye.
Can you repeat that? Senator Bazell? Senator Pecoraro?
Nay.
Senator Curtis?
Nay.
Senator Zhang? Senator Zhao? Senator Good? Senator Bullock? Senator Binkley? Senator Urea? Abstain. Senator Farrell? Senator Letty?
Aye.
Senator Bartlett?
Nay.
Senator Stick?
Abstain.
Senator Yearly?
Nay.
Senator Wayne?
Abstain.
Senator Torges?
Nay.
Senator Watt? Senator Bernetti?
Nay.
Senator Thompson? Nay. Senator Caldwell?
Every once in a while,
Senator Maddox?
speech actually works.
Senator Camarda? Senator Dulcich?
Aye.
Pro Tem Hopkins?
Nay.
Vice President Lockhead? Vice President Melgar?
Abstain.
Vice President Dinner?
Nay.
Gorko too, right?
I didn't.
This resolution does not pass. All right, we've exhausted, yeah, we exhausted the agenda. We just did a roll call vote, we're gonna count that as attendance.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So,
Motion to adjourn.
that is
Second.
adjourned.
Wait.